Chapter 261. In the cold stone chamber, only the great shaman's deep panting could be heard. Ghost King and Ghostly stood before this frail old man, staring intently at his aged face. Right now, the great shaman's remaining life was their only hope. The great shaman calmed down, raised his head, smiled at the both of them. Ghost King and Ghostly then felt slightly relieved. The great shaman pondered for a moment, spoke to Ghost King. "Will sect head please find some blood? Soul summoning lure, evil arts. Blood is the best." Ghostly frowned slightly. Ghost King already nodded and said, "That's easy." He was about to leave after speaking, suddenly thought of something, stopped, and asked the great shaman, "Master, this blood. Do you want beast blood or human blood?" The great shaman was stunned, glanced at Ghost King again, but still said, "Beast blood is also fine, but in terms of effect, human blood is the best." Ghost King nodded, strided to the door, opened it. Qing Long, Yu were standing outside. Mr. Ghost in Black also stood slightly further away. Seeing Ghost King suddenly coming out, Qing Long, Yuji's faces were slightly shocked at the same time, but Ghost King did not look at them, directly spoke to Mr. Ghost. "Bring a basin of fresh human blood." Qing Long and Yuji were stunned. Mr. Ghost only nodded, turned and left. Ghost King also turned back. Only Qing Long and Yuji, whose faces gradually darkened, stood where they were. In the cold stone chamber, for some reason, the atmosphere suddenly turned strange. Ghostly quietly watched Bai Yao, who was lying there. After a long time, turned and looked at the great shaman who was resting, and then his eyes landed on Ghost King. Ghost King seemed to not feel anything, his expression calm and composed, a pair of eyes only watching Bai Yao. Occasionally glanced at Ghostly, but it was only a quick glance, did not linger at all. On the stone door, two sounds were suddenly heard, and then it slowly opened. Mr. Ghost carried a copper basin in, placed it before the great shaman, and then nodded to Ghost King. Ghost King slightly nodded. Mr. Ghost did not say anything and quietly retreated. Bright red blood swayed gently in the copper basin. A strong smell of blood permeated the stone chamber. Ghostly's eyes twitched slightly, looked deeply at Ghost King. Ghost King instead unhurriedly spoke to the great shaman. "Master, the blood you wanted is here." The great shaman opened his eyes, looked at the basin of blood in front of him, was silent. After a long while suddenly sighed, said, "All right, let us begin." Supporting his weak body, the grand wizard slowly stood up, but before he could straighten his body, it was already swaying. Ghostly rushed forward and supported him from the side. The great shaman glanced at him, laughed bitterly, but did not delay any further. The frail old man slowly reached into his bosom and fumbled around for a moment. When he reached out, there was a strange red pen in his hand. The body of the pen was roughly the thickness of a thumb and the length of a normal person's palm. The end of the brush was in the shape of a dog's head. It was unknown what the red brush was made of, but it was engraved with all kinds of strange runes. At the tip of the brush, a tuft of fine hairs was evenly embedded. Its original color could not be seen, only a remnant of dark red on it. Without asking what this brush was stained with in the past, most likely most of it was blood and the like. Holding the brush, inhaled deeply. The great shaman, with Ghost Lee's support, lowered his body, soaked the red brush in the blood for a moment, and then lifted it up. Blood from the fine hairs at the tip of the brush, drop by drop, silently dripped into the copper basin, creating small ripples on the surface of the blood, rippling out. Holding the brush, the great shaman slowly walked with Ghost Lee's support to the cold stone platform, where Bai Yu was lying. From the point where the platform and the ground were connected, slowly drew the first stroke. The bright color gradually extended on the originally flat ground. The old man's slightly trembling hands drew one after another blood talisman. The surroundings were silent, but for some reason, the atmosphere seemed to be gradually tensing up. Ghost King watched for a while, quietly walked to the copper basin, carried it up, walked a few steps, and placed it beside the great shaman. The great shaman, who was drawing, raised his head and glanced at him, quietly nodded, and then lowered his head again and continued. More and more blood strokes. With Biyu's cold stone platform as the center, gradually appeared around her. A strange and bloody formation had already appeared. The great shaman's red brush was obviously also a unique southern border witchcraft, the blood that was sucked by the red brush, drawn on the ground by the great shaman. The blood actually congealed and did not dry, the color fresh and glossy, and at the corners and corners, not a single trace of blood spilled out, like a prison firmly encircled the blood within. Following the great shaman's panting sounds again, and gradually getting heavier, the blood drawings on the ground also gradually became complicated. These strange drawings, some looked like domestic animals, some like big birds, and some completely unrecognizable drawings. One after another appeared, and not a single one was the same. The only thing they had in common was that these patterns were all interconnected. More and more blood was drawn on the ground from the copper basin, but the color of the blood that fell on the ground seemed to be even brighter than the blood that had been in the copper basin. The bloody stench in the air became thicker in the stone chamber. Other than the great shaman's panting sounds, there was no other sound. These blood drawings, starting from the stone platform on Biyu's left shoulder, the great shaman concentrated on drawing stroke by stroke. Ghostly supported him, saw with his own eyes this fresh blood color from nothing, from less to more, gradually converging into a 5 chi radius oval ring. Right now, other than a small piece of ground near Biyu's head, Bailu's surroundings had already become blood color. Ghost King again lifted the copper basin, placed it on the ground above the stone platform, and then slowly walked to the side. This strange formation was almost completed. Countless connected together, big or small strange drawings, glimmered with blood-colored light. At first glance, it looked like a stretch of crisscrossing rivers, the fresh red, lively blood like in the blood vessels, happily swimming. From one side to another, from the end back like a gentle tide, growing and multiplying without end. The crisscrossing bright red gradually converged on the ground below. The great shaman's hand, without knowing when, seemed to be trembling and unable to hold that red brush. Ghostly, who was supporting the old man, could clearly feel the pain from the old man's body. Even he himself could not understand what was the reason for this body to be able to persevere till now. The heavy panting sounds had already turned hoarse. The great shaman's forehead was wet, but there was no more sweat to flow. He slowly stretched out his hand, dipped the red brush full of blood, and drew the last stroke, the last completed drawing, connected with the first blood drawing, together. Pooh! A deep sound. The red brush powerlessly fell to the side. The weight in Ghost Lee's arms suddenly became heavy. The great shaman's body, just like that, slumped down. Ghost Lee's heart jumped, a sound in his head uncontrollably. Even his back instantly felt the fear of needles piercing into his bones. He held his breath, exerted more strength to support the great shaman. Looked down. The great shaman's face was ashen, but his mouth was slightly agape, still panting, evidently due to overexertion. Ghostly then calmed down and at the same time realized in that moment just now his forehead and back were also wet. Beside him, almost at the same time, Ghost King's long exhalation was heard. Evidently, he was also shocked. Right now, these two men who looked down upon the world were actually trembling with fear because of this dying old man's actions. The great shaman panted for a long time, seemed to have recovered slightly, nodded to Ghostly, signaling him to sit down. Ghostly was perturbed, looking at the great shaman. He was really afraid that this old man would die if he was not careful. Just that right now, no matter how worried he was, he could only follow the great shaman's instructions, helped him to sit down, right at the top of the Bayao stone platform. The great shaman breathed deeply, looked ahead. In front of him was a blood formation that was already completely connected, the blood-colored passageways all over the ground, imprisoning countless amounts of blood in it. And those fresh blood seemed to be affected by an invisible force on the flat ground, almost at the same time started to flow towards the same direction. In between, there was not a trace of separation from the bloodline like brush marks. From one end to the other, and then from the connected passageways back, forming a cycle, growing and multiplying, circulating without end. Ghost Lee and Ghost King, who were standing behind the great shaman, looked at each other. Both of them were great experts in the cultivation world. Right now, their eyes were filled with astonishment. The great shaman was silent for a moment, stretched out his withered hand, picked up the red brush that had fallen beside him, held it vertically in front of him. The red fine hairs at the tip pointed downwards on the red brush. There were still remnant blood droplets, condensed into beads. After struggling on the fine hairs for a moment, silently fell, merged into that blood river in front of him. Chapter 262. The great shaman stared intently. The heavy panting sounds suddenly quietened down. The stone chamber suddenly quietened down. He slowly raised his eyebrows, and his originally lifeless eyes actually began to light up. The blood in the array in front of him seemed to be stimulated by something, and the speed at which it flowed suddenly increased. The hand holding the red pen slowly landed. Very soon it touched the ground, just 3 inches away from the outermost blood river. The slender red hair touched the ground, but it did not bend. The entire ground suddenly seemed to become soft water, and this red pen slowly and silently inserted itself into the ground. The atmosphere in the stone chamber slowly turned strange, following the faster and faster blood river, gradually emitted indistinct whistling sounds. Faint blood energy followed that red pen into the ground, gradually rose from the formation, and then merged with the faint white energy emitted from the cold stone platform, enveloped by Yao in it. Ghost King and Ghost Lee's eyes did not even blink, stared intently at the scene. The great shaman released the red pen in his hand. A deep incantation voice started to reverberate in the stone chamber. The great shaman's cracked lips lightly but frequently spat out one after another strange incantation. His hands, as if following an inexplicable melody, slowly stretched to the air, 5 fingers forming claws, gently waved. The whistling sound in the stone chamber grew louder and louder. On the ground, the river of blood in the spell formation was already surging violently. Each wave was higher than the last, and waves of ghostly power came from the river of blood. Suddenly, the great shaman spat out a sharp whistle, his 5 fingers like claws clawed down, a sound into the blood river. Almost at the same time, Ghost King and Ghostly, who were standing behind him, were at a loss. In that instant, they felt that the stone chamber did not exist anymore. The 4 walls, the stone floor, suddenly became empty, like they were in the summer void, vast beyond the sky. Eerie, dark, there was nothing to rely on. Ghost cries were heard abruptly, swarming in from all directions. Brilliant red light burst out from the red blood formation, charged up to the sky. In the swaying red light, countless of spirits panicked, like being sucked here by an invisible force, involuntarily scurried everywhere, but no matter what, they could not escape from that red light screen. And at this moment, the stone chamber resumed its original appearance. Ghostly and Ghost King's senses immediately woke up. The 2 of them were shocked in their hearts, as they knew that at that instant earlier, this soul-beckoning lure formation actually disregarded the surrounding stone walls and the belly of the mountain as nothing, and used the mysterious shaman power of the southern border to forcefully connect the 9 nether ghost world to capture innumerable spirits and ghosts and confine them within this formation. Just that this formation was so mystical. Naturally, it consumed a lot of vitality. Looking through the red light, the great shaman's expression was already so bad that it could not get any worse. If one said that right now he was a dead man, most likely someone would also believe it. Ghost King and Ghost King's heartbeat uncontrollably sped up, secretly prayed that this great shaman must hold on. At the same time, both of their eyes stared unwaveringly at that formation. In the field, numerous spirits howled and leaped and danced in the red light. There were ordinary spirits. There were also strange-looking mountain spirits and huge beasts. After a while, those spirits that were repelled by the red light probably knew that they could not escape. One by one turned their heads and howled at the great shaman sitting in front of the formation. The great shaman did not look at those angry spirits. A pair of eyes slowly lifted, focused on the stone platform shrouded in red light. on the Hehuan bell in Bailu's hand. Both of his arms suddenly waved, left hand like a claw, right hand 5 fingers instead changed. Ring finger, little finger bent inwards 3 degrees, middle finger, index finger like a sword, thumb pointing to the sky. It was the shaman incantation, pointing in the air. Hehuan bell rang. Ding. The clear ringing, like an oriole in the deep valley, chirping in the morning, that Hehuan bell actually left Bailu's hand, slowly rose to the air. Faint golden light again emitted from the bell. Almost at the same time, when the great shaman pointed at Hehuan bell, the numerous spirits and spirits in the soul-summoning blood formation seemed to be urged by an invisible force, although angry and howling. Unwilling but like tide water, they all pounced towards the golden Hehuan bell in the air. In that instant, the ghostly energy surged. Hehuan bell trembled violently. Ghostly evil powers surged in from all directions, repeatedly attacking. Countless spirits and spirits swarmed over, biting the bell, ferociously striking. The scene was a frenzied one. And under this scene, the red blood sea in the formation, the red light became brighter. The blood howled, almost boiling. As if unable to withstand the eerie, ghostly powers, Hehuan bell's faint golden light gradually dimmed, submerged in the innumerable spirits. After a moment, a sharp sound above the Hehuan bell. A light smoke slowly formed, indistinctly discernible, intermittent and continuous, floating on the Hehuan bell, just that the latter half seemed to still be in Hehuan bell. The great shaman's face, for some reason, suddenly turned slightly rosy again. Compared to before, it looked much better. Even the arm that was waving seemed to have more strength. A trace of joy flashed past his old face. His mouth loudly shouted, "Duo! Remit soul out of body, 9 souls return. Netherworld 9 nether, summoning souls to lead." These 4 incantations, the great shaman's voice was full of vigor, awe-inspiring. Following his voice, the red light dispersed with a loud bang. In that instant covered the entire stone chamber. Ghost King and Ghostly felt another wave of rumbling. That empty, eerie, as if they were in the 9 netherworld again, appeared. The only difference was, right now the surroundings were filled with ghostly cries. There were actually innumerable spirits and spirits flying in all directions. Boom! It was as if it didn't stop for even a moment. It was like a bolt of lightning piercing through the sky, unstoppable. Before the 2 of them could regain their senses, the scene around them changed back to the stone room. In the red demonic screen, countless ghosts danced in the air. The light smoke on the joyous union bell was surrounded by countless ghosts, and wisps of smoke slowly appeared. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 3 souls, and 7 physical forms. It was the soul. Ghost Lee's body trembled. His fingernails dug deep into his flesh. Blood flowed down, but he was completely unaware. Within that red curtain of light, there were wisps of light smoke. He turned his head and looked at the great shaman. Just a moment of time would be enough. He could not help but roared in his heart. The great shaman's face was also flushed, suddenly like the tide receded. The deep wrinkles around the corners of his eyes started to twitch. That pair of withered hands waving in the air again started to tremble. Only his voice was still that loud and clear. 3 souls and 7 physical forms. Gather spirits to become gods. Unite deities to search spirits. Become one. Following his words, the 9 light smoke that appeared successively in the air flew out from the crowd of spirits and spirits, slowly approached Hehuan bell, gradually merged with that light smoke on Hehuan bell. Indistinctly, a human figure gradually appeared. Right now, not only Ghostly, even Ghost King could not help but tremble, his face filled with excitement. The great shaman's face had turned pale again. His hands also trembled even more violently in the red light. He opened his mouth and loudly said, "The soul is formed. All spirits return to their positions. Spirit's soul enter." The word body that was left in his throat at that moment when it was about to come out, the great shaman's voice, suddenly turned hoarse. What was emitted was only a subtle deep sound. Ghost King and Ghost Lee's countenances changed greatly at the same time. The red light in the soul summoning spell formation shook violently. Suddenly, a loud bang erupted. The red light scattered, and countless ghosts suddenly soared into the sky. One by one, they sank into the stone wall and disappeared without a trace. Just that Ghost King and Ghostly could not be bothered with that. Through the chaotic images, both of them looked straight at the great shaman. That elder, his hands were still raised in the air, but his head slowly drooped down. Ghostly and Ghost King, like lightning, dashed to the great shaman, supported his body, but the great shaman's head still slowly, but unstoppably drooped down. Just that in his mouth, it seemed like he was still struggling to say something. Ghost King and Ghostly tried their best to get close to the great shaman. In that already muffled voice, they could only indistinctly hear a few intermittent words. Woo, nine nether. Woo woo, extreme woo, not. That voice gradually became quiet. The old man's head finally drooped down on his chest. There was no more news. The bone-chilling coldness, like being in the deep underworld ice prison. The two wooden-faced men could not believe what they were seeing. The dissipating red light gradually disappeared. The raging blood river quietened down. The bloodstains that had lost their power could no longer restrain the blood. Fresh human blood flowed all over the ground. The light smoke on Hehuan Bell, like a whale sucking in water, was sucked back, disappeared into the bell. The faint golden light again floated up, making the Hehuan Bell especially dazzling. A gentle swaying, accompanied by a clear ringing, Hehuan Bell slowly descended, returned to lying on the cold stone platform, in Bai Yao's hands, quiet as before. A deathly silence pervaded the cold stone chamber, did not disperse for a long time, not a single sound. Chapter 263. Majestic Fox Mountain, Ghost King's sect headquarters. It had been 3 days since the great shaman passed away. Qing Long ordered people to cremate the old man's body and kept it in an urn. Right now, this small blue and white urn was quietly placed on the table beside him. Qing Long stared at the urn for a long time, sighed softly, and looked away. These 3 days, Ghost King's sex affairs, big or small, were all handled by Qing Long and Yu Ji. After that incident 3 days ago, Ghost King and Ghostly both actually shrunk into their own rooms and had not come out till now. Azure Dragon could still clearly remember that 3 days ago, when the heavy stone door slowly opened with a creaking sound, the two men who walked out from inside, the two men who were almost fearless in the entire world, actually looked as if they had lost their souls, their expressions absent-minded and sorrowful. Ghost King was still fine, quietly said, "Within 3 days, no one is to disturb me." After speaking, he walked straight back to his room and never came out again. As for that Ghostly, he seemed to have lost his soul, did not speak a word, walked and walked, directly hit the hard stone wall, causing blood to flow down from his forehead. As for him, it was as if he didn't notice anything. He slowly turned around and walked back to his own room, stumbling a little. The crowd who were stunned by the strange scene, most of them had already guessed the result, but when they looked into the stone door, the ground was covered with blood, and the great shaman sitting upright in the pool of blood with his head hanging down. That tragic scene was really a ghastly sight. Only Bai Yao, who was still lying on the cold stone platform, her serene and lifelike face, was still as tranquil as usual, and the Hehuan bell in her hand was emitting faint golden light. Footsteps sounded from the side. Interrupting Qing Long's thoughts, he looked up and saw Yuji's figure drifting in like a ghost, standing beside him, but she did not look at him directly and instead glanced at the room behind him, quietly said, "Sect head has not come out yet?" Qing Long slowly shook his head, quietly said, 3 days, no news at all." Yuji's black veil moved slightly, did not speak. Although they didn't see it with their own eyes, the two of them could completely imagine the sadness of the scene. In this world, if there was anything more heartbreaking than despair, it would be seeing hope. Even when that hope was right in front of you, you fell into despair. Just when the two of them were speechless, suddenly, from the door behind Qing Long, a light sound was heard. The door slowly opened. Azure Dragon and Yu Chi's body shook, and they quickly turned around to look. The simple wooden door slowly opened inwards, emitting a low and light creaking sound. It carried with it the vicissitudes of the past, perhaps also narrating the owner's sorrow. A foot stepped out of the room. The Ghost King's figure slowly appeared before them. Qing Long and Yu Ji silently looked at the man who seemed to be in another world. Chapter 264. Ghost King's hair had actually all turned snow white. Qing Long's voice, for some reason, suddenly became hoarse and hesitant. Even when he heard it, he also doubted if it was actually his own voice. Sect. Head, are you still well? Well? Ghost King's lips moved but did not speak. Instead, he closed his eyes, raised his head slightly, and breathed deeply. Yuji, under the black veil, suddenly said, Sect Head, you must take care of yourself, your body. Speaking till the end, for some reason, she suddenly thought of Bai Yao. Her voice choked. Ghost King's shoulders trembled slightly, but very quickly calmed down. When he opened his eyes again, although the vicissitudes and desolation were still etched on his face, but in his eyes, there was already a faint light. That gaze seemed to have seen through the vicissitudes of the world. I look like I've aged a lot. He actually said that. The corners of his lips moved slightly, a slight smile, but in it, it was full of bitterness. Qing Long and Yuji lowered their heads at the same time, could not bear to look at this man. Ghost King again took a deep breath, exhaled the air in his chest. His eyes turned and after a moment, landed on the table beside Qing Long's hand, on that small blue and white urn. What is inside is? He indifferently asked. Qing Long took a step forward, carried the small urn and passed it to Ghost King, said, after the great shaman passed away, subordinate made the bold decision to cremate the old man's body. What is in this small urn is his ashes relic. Ghost King silently took over the small blue and white urn. Both of his hands caressed it for a long time, gently sighed and said, although this master did not manage to save Yao, but in his dying body, disregarded everything and exhausted his vitality, collected Yao's soul, although in the end he failed at the last moment, but he is still our great benefactor. He once again passed the urn back to Qing Long, said, get ready, with our holy sect's heavy gifts, respectfully send the master back to southern border. Qing Long received the small blue and white urn, nodded and said, yes. Ghost King was silent for a moment, said, Ghostly, how is he? Qing Long hesitated for a moment. Yuji had already said. After coming out from the cold stone room, he seemed to have collapsed, lost his soul, stumbled back to his room, and never came out again. Speaking till here, she paused, quietly said, until today, it has been 3 days. Ghost King's face was bleak, slowly put his hands behind his back, after a long while quietly recited, 10 years of heartache, 1 night in my heart. Sai, let's go and see him. After saying that, he slowly walked away with his hands clasped behind his back. Qing Long and Yuji looked at each other and silently followed behind him. Looking from behind, Ghost King had a head of white hair. His figure was strangely desolate. Ghost Li's room was quite far from Ghost King's room, but very close to Bailu's room. This was because Ghost King was not willing to be sadder and so left his daughter's room. And if Ghostly was in majestic Fox Mountain, he would visit Bailu almost every day. When the three of them passed through the tunnel and gradually neared Ghost Li's room, Qing Long and Yuji, who were walking behind, clearly discovered something strange with Ghost King's body, not knowing if it was because this place was close to that heartache place again. But both of them did not say a word. Finally, they came to the lonely stone door, Ghost Li's room. There was no one around. He had always liked to be alone. Just that outside his door, far away, stood a Ghost King sect disciple. Ghost King walked up, opened the door and walked in, then was stunned. Qing Long and Yuji also felt something was wrong, walked in and saw the room was empty. Not only Ghostly was nowhere to be seen, even Xiao Hui was nowhere to be seen. The furnishings in the room were as usual, not a single trace of being used, only that bed looked messy. Qing Long frowned, turned and called out. That Ghost King sect disciple hurriedly ran in, knelt down in front of Ghost King, and saluted, "Greetings, sect head." Ghost King turned and looked Qing Long beside him softly said, "Other than handling the sect affairs these few days, subordinate has been waiting outside sect head's door. As for this place, let these disciples guard it well." Ghost King nodded slightly, turned, and spoke to that disciple. "Where is Vice Sect Head?" That Ghost King sect disciple was obviously in awe of Ghost King. Even his voice was slightly trembling, said, reporting to Sect Head, Vice Sect Head had shut himself in the room for 3 days and 3 nights. There was no movement at all. Just as I was worrying, this morning, he suddenly walked out with that gray-furred monkey and left this place. Ghost King was stunned. Qing Long frowned and said, "Where did he go?" That disciple lowered his head and said, "Disciple had been following Vice Sect Head. Saw him walking out of the mountain, and then flew away. Disciple saw his expression and appearance. It was very scary. Disciple did not dare to go up to ask, and could only come back here to wait." Anger flashed across Qing Long's face. Ghost King suddenly exclaimed, walked a few steps forward, picked up a sealed letter from the bedside, took a look and passed it to Qing Long, said, "It's for you." Qing Long was stunned, took a look. It was indeed written for him. Puzzled, glanced at Ghost King. But Ghost King was expressionless. Looking elsewhere, Qing Long frowned, tore open the seal, and read the letter once. The letter was not long. He quickly finished reading it, just that his face suddenly looked a little gloomy, quietly said, "Sect Head." Ghost King indifferently said, "What is it?" Qing Long said, "In the letter, he requested me to make a tough trip to send this great shaman's ashes back to the southern border Miao tribe 7 Mile Cave." Ghost King slowly shook his head, suddenly sighed and said, "Forget it, forget it." Qing Long was stunned. Ghost King instead turned to that Ghost King sect disciple and said, "You can leave." That person, as if granted amnesty, heavily kowtowed 3 times and hurriedly retreated. Qing Long looked at Ghost King, said, "Sect Head." That ghostly Ghost King glanced at the empty room, his eyes filled with desolation. After a long time he turned around, without calling out to Qing Long Yuji. He only walked away quietly. From his back figure, a faint, low, and deep voice was heard. "All heartbroken people, southern border, Funxiang Valley." This good faction big sect, which had been undergoing unforeseen event for the past few days. Today, there was another shocking news, instantly spread throughout the entire valley. From the depths of Funxiang Valley, Tianxiang residents 7 beats of the sky drum, resounding far and near, indicating that Funxiang Valley Master Yun Elon, who had been in seclusion for a long time, would come out today. All of the Funxiang Valley disciples returned to their positions. No one dared to be negligent. In Funxiang Valley Main Hall, Shani Hall, Shangwan Su, Lu Shun, and the rest of the disciples lined up in front of the hall, patiently waiting. Among the crowd, the most eye-catching was a girl standing beside Lu Shun. It was Yan Hong. Ever since that night, when the 9-tailed celestial fox escaped from the Inferno altar, Shangwan Su in the chaos still recognized Yan Hong as an imposter, after which it was proven that it was evil sect He Huan, sect Jean Pinger in disguise, but the real Yan Hong was only discovered 3 days ago in the cellar of a house in Funxiang Valley. This was naturally that day when Jean Pinger used a strange spell to subdue Yan Hong and hid her in such a place. These few days, the entire Funxiang Valley came out in full force, searched all the big and small hills nearby, but they did not notice the house in the valley. This was because 3 days ago, a male disciple, because the valley lacked a herb, went down to the cellar to search, and then found Yan Hong. If not, who knows how long this poor girl would have to wait in that cellar. Just that these few days of torture, Yan Hong clearly looked more haggard, but right now the crowd did not have the mood to pay attention to her. All of their eyes were on the main hall side door. According to the usual practice, Yun Elon, who was out of seclusion, would walk out from there to meet the crowd. Shang Wansu, who was standing in front of the crowd, was still dressed in black, his expression calm, just that deep in his eyes which no one could detect. His eyes indistinctly flickered with a strange glint. To him, for the past few years, this senior brother Yun Elon, every time they met, there was always a screen between them, and when he spoke, he sounded even more weak, and in recent days he seemed to be getting older. Initially, he also did not dare to believe, but recently he gradually believed in his heart this senior brother who had always been above him, was really not going to make it. Unexpectedly today, Tianxiang restaurant's drum like thunder shook him to the ground. Yun Elon was out of seclusion. Could it be that he was really in seclusion practicing spells and not trying to hide something? Shangwan-Su's heart was in a mess, extremely perturbed. And behind Shangwan-Su, Li Sun, who was standing in front of the younger generation disciples, could not hide the excitement in his eyes. All along, he was Yun Elon's proudest disciple. In Funxiang Valley, he was even more so the heaven's pride. Just that a few years ago, Yun Elon suddenly went into seclusion without any warning, and from then on did not meet with the rest. Chapter 265. Although Li Sun was regarded specially by Yun Elon, together with his teacher Uncle Shangwan, so were the only two in Funxiang Valley who could have an audience with Yun Elon, but not sure if it was because Yun Elon felt that Li Sun was after all young and not skilled enough. Funxiang Valley's important matters were left to Shangwan-Su, and so imperceptibly, Li Sun's position dropped a lot. But now that Yun Elon was out of seclusion, the situation naturally changed. He was the current Valley Master's most favored disciple, the next Valley Master's choice. His words naturally carried a different weight. And more importantly, just yesterday, the night before Yun Elon came out of seclusion, he was already secretly received by Yun Elon and knew beforehand that his teacher was coming out of seclusion. And following his teacher's exit, one of his long-awaited, long-cherished wish could finally be fulfilled. At the thought of this, Li Sun's handsome face could no longer contain his excitement. Shangwan-Su's body moved, slowly turned back. That young junior nephew behind him, although tried his best to maintain his composure, but that joy and excitement from the bottom of his heart was after all not something that his age and experience could cover, and even more impossible to escape Shangwan-Su's eagle-like eyes that could see through the world. He slowly laughed coldly in his heart, quietly said, "Young man, the road you have to walk, I don't know how long it will be." Just when everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, suddenly melodious drum sounds, as if flying in from the heavens, circled in the great hall. Shangwan-Su and the rest perked up, tidied up their attire, and looked towards the side door. A red figure flashed. A figure slowly appeared, a fiery red attire. It was Funxiang Valley's past Valley Master's attire, representing this fire sect's faith. They did not feel the heat of the fire, neither did they see the dazzling light, but for some reason, with that red in front of them, all had a feeling a ball of red fire slowly walked over. And when everyone regained their senses and saw the person in that ball of red light, including Shangwan-Su, who had always been calm and composed, all of them could not believe it and quietly exclaimed in bewilderment. The person who had come was a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s. His bright but soft red hair was not tied up and casually fell on his shoulders, giving him an air of elegance and debauchery. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. When Yun Elon went into seclusion several years ago, everyone clearly remembered that he was already an old man, and his hair had long since turned white. But now, this person looked much younger than Yun Elon from back then, and his skin was bright and smooth, without a single wrinkle to be seen. Just that this person's face was clearly Yun Elon's, especially Shangwan-Su. He had been with Yun Elon longer than anyone else. Even more recognized this was clearly Yun Elon's appearance when he was young. Just that looking at that face, it was even more outstanding than when he was young. Under such shock, everyone was speechless. On the other hand, Yun Elon acted as if nothing had happened, swaggered into the main hall, in front of everyone. His eyes were bright and full of expression, looked at everyone, suddenly smiled. His voice was different from the old voice in the secret room, clear and melodious, said, "What? All of you don't recognize me as the Valley Master?" Everyone was shocked. Li Sun was the first to recover, knelt down, and loudly said, "Disciple respectfully welcomes teacher out. Congratulations, teacher, for your great success in your seclusion training." Everyone immediately woke up and bowed. Shangwan-Su's surprise slowly faded. He also lowered his head and bowed. Yun Elon clearly looked good. His mood was also very good, waved his hand and said, all right. Everyone has not seen each other for a long time. Stand up and speak." Everyone acknowledged and stood up. Yun Elon smiled and looked at the crowd. Finally, his eyes landed on Shang Wansu, smiled and said, Junior brother, these few years you have taken care of the valley's trifling matters. Are you tired? Shang Wansu shook his head, also revealed a smile and said, Senior brother is not around. It is my duty as a junior brother. Instead, there was an accident at Inferno Altar a few days ago. Yun Elon suddenly laughed loudly, interrupted Shang Wansu's words, said, The matters of the past. Junior brother does not have to brood over it. The future is long. We will take our time to think about it. A trace of surprise flashed past Shang Wansu's face, but he did not say anything, bowed his head and said, Yes. Yun Elon looked at the people present and saw that their eyes were filled with respect and amazement. It was clear that his youthful-looking appearance had shocked them all, just that he did not explain much. Turned and asked Li Sun, who was already standing beside, what happened in the valley recently. Li Sun stepped forward, respectfully said, This morning, Central Plains Xin Yun sect head Reverend Daoxian sent a letter, said it is a reply to teacher's letter a few days ago. As he spoke, his expression was calm, but Shang Wansu, who was standing beside, his expression changed. When Yun Elon was in seclusion, Funxiang Valley's major matters were all decided by him. The correspondence with Qin Yun's sect head was naturally an extremely important matter, but he knew nothing about it. And this reply letter had arrived this morning. Li Sun, for some reason, intercepted it halfway and did not let him know. It was obvious senior brother Yun Elon purposely did not let him interfere. Shang Wansu's anger gradually grew, but his face remained the same. A strange expression flashed past. Yun Elon nodded, took the letter that Li Sun handed over, appraised it. On the letter were written neatly, Funxiang Valley Yun Elon senior brother to see personally. Signed off, Qin Yun sect Daoxian pays a visit. It was indeed Qin Yun sect Reverend Daoxian's handwritten letter. Yun Elon smiled, tore open the seal, took out a thin piece of paper, and read it from start to end, his face still carrying a smile. At the end, he nodded slightly. After a moment, kept the letter in his bosom, loudly said to the crowd, Today we will end here. All of you go back and prepare. Not long later, I will lead Funxiang Valley outstanding disciples to Central Plains to pay a visit to Qin Yun's sect and Tianyin Temple friends to discuss the world's great plans. Everyone was shocked. Funxiang Valley entering Central Plains on a large scale was already a long time ago. Unexpectedly, the valley head had just come out from seclusion and gave such an important order. Just that Yun Elon's prestige had always been deep. The Funxiang Valley disciples did not think much of it. After the greetings, they all retreated and went to prepare. Only Li Sun was left behind by Yun Elon. After the crowd left, only Yun Elon and Li Sun were left in the hall. Li Sun was alone with his teacher. He was not as reserved as when everyone else was present, smiled and said, Teacher, what kind of skill are you actually practicing in seclusion to have such a miraculous effect? Yun Elon smiled and said, This is the skill passed down by our Funxiang Valley founder. In the future, when your skills are enough, will you still be afraid that I will not pass it down to you? Li Sun was surprised, saw the amiable smile in Yun Elon's eyes, as if there was a deep meaning. After thinking for a while, couldn't help but be overjoyed, quickly bowed and said, Thank you, teacher, for your kindness. Disciple will definitely not disappoint teacher's expectations. Yun Elon smiled and helped Li Sun up, looked at him up and down, sighed and said, Your physique is extraordinary, a great talent for cultivation. Just that I see that you are young and impetuous. Your temperament is still somewhat impetuous. You have to grasp more of yourself. In this way, with more practice, you will be able to achieve great things. Li Sun nodded his head repeatedly, said, Thank you, teacher, for your guidance. Oh, right. Teacher, you asked me to stay behind. Is there any matter? Yun Elon glanced at him, said, That's right. I want you to make a trip to Central Plains first. Li Sun was stunned, said, Central Plains? To where? Yun Elon indifferently said, Qin Yun Hill. I will write a reply in a while. You will immediately set off and deliver this letter to Qin Yun Hill, Reverend Daoxian. Li Sun nodded and said yes. Yun Elon paced back and forth a few steps, said, After Reverend Daoxian reads this letter, most likely he will ask you to stay at Qin Yun Hill for a few days. You don't have to delay. Just stay at Xinyan for a few days. I will bring the rest over later. Li Sun nodded, but felt slightly puzzled, said, Teacher, you are in such a hurry to enter Central Plains. Is there any urgent matter? Yin Elon smiled and said, Isn't it that matter that you have been begging me for a long time? Li Sun's body shook and then revealed an unconcealable excitement on his face. Immediately knelt down again, loudly said, Thank you, teacher, for fulfilling my wish. Yin Elon shook his head and smiled, said, All right, you go back and prepare first. Come back later to collect my letter, and then we will move out directly. Li Sun excitedly replied and strode out. When this young disciple's figure disappeared, the smile on Yin Elon's face also gradually turned indifferent. He turned to the south, gazed towards the direction of the 10,000 great mountains. After a long while, suddenly snorted coldly. Since you want to come out, I will let the entire world to stop you. Want me to carry this burden alone? Heh, I am not that foolish. Chapter 266. 10,000 Great Mountains, Subdue, Devil, Ancient Cave. The Subdue, Devil, Ancient Cave after the resurrection of the evil beast. The scene was already very different from before when the dark clouds hung over, the een wind howling. Although the sky was still dusky, but the black gas that gathered at the cave entrance had already dissipated, the een wind that blew out from the cave all year round also disappeared without a trace. Other than the still, barren mountain range, there was only that female statue standing at the entrance of the Subdue, Devil, Ancient Cave, still standing there unmoved in the wind and rain. And right in front of it, dressed in bright silk clothes, was an extremely handsome, and could even be said to be a seductive youth. Fairer than the average girl's face, thin eyebrows, red eyes, thin lips, and sharp chin. Looking carefully, this face indistinctly resembled that female statue. Just that the temperament on both of their faces were entirely different. This youth was the evil beast who was resurrected from the Subdue, Devil, Ancient Cave. No one would have expected the demon that instilled fear in countless of southern border people was actually this handsome youth. From the day of his resurrection, for some reason, he did not do anything, neither massacred wantonly nor did he roar in ecstasy, only quietly stood in front of Linglong Shaman Lady statue, quietly watching. A black shadow flashed. The evil shaman soundlessly floated over from afar, came behind the youth. Beast Deity Master. The youth did not move, did not even turn his head, said, How is it? The evil shaman stared at his back, said, The 13 demon kings have already subdued the remaining barbarians in the 10,000 great mountains. All of them are under the command of the Beast Deity Master. Only then did the young man's body move. He slowly turned around and said indifferently, How many clans are left? The evil shaman said, Now only 37 tribes. In these 100 years, the 10,000 great mountains are like dragons without a leader. The various barbarians killed each other. Many tribes were exterminated. The youth coldly laughed. There was no disappointment on his face. On the contrary, there was an indistinct, untamed feeling emanating from the depths of his heart. His eyes, like lightning, scanned the evil shaman's face, which was covered by the black veil. The evil shaman suddenly felt that his face felt like it was being burned by a fire. Actually, it should be the 38 tribes. That youth leisurely said, Isn't there still you, the last successor of the black shaman tribe? The evil shaman lowered his head, remained silent. The youth slowly turned his head. His eyes once again landed on Linglong Shaman Lady's face. After staring for a long time, he suddenly called out, Blackwood. The evil shaman's body shook. This name to him, like a wound carved deep in his heart. Every time it was called out, it hurt him once. The young man stared at Linglong's statue, and his voice suddenly became filled with the vicissitudes of life. After so many years, have you ever regretted being in front of Linglong? The evil shaman was silent. After a long while, he quietly said, Yes. The young man didn't even turn back. His eyes flickered with a strange light, and he faintly said, In this world, other than your big brother who turned into a ferocious spirit, only you know the relationship between me and Linglong. Back then, the 8 of you chased me through mountains and rivers. Now that I think about it, it seems like it was only yesterday. The evil shaman's body under the black veil suddenly started to tremble, as if the past events were still vivid in his mind. But that young man did not notice the lich's reaction at all. His words, rather than saying that he was talking to the lich, it would be better to say that he was talking to the statue in a low voice. In his eyes, there was only the statue of Linglong Witch. "You," he said, his voice slowly growing sad, sorrowful, and indignant. "What are you doing this for?" The stone statue was speechless and stood there silently. "In your heart are the common people of the world, the destiny of the heavens, and good fortune all that important?" The young man's voice suddenly grew excited and louder. "If you value them more than me, so you want to get rid of me, is that it?" The expression on the young man's face was a strange and bewitching cold smile. "But do you know, I don't care at all. What bullsh asterisk T, will of heaven? What living beings in the world? What do they count for?" His expression became more and more mournful. The strange thing was that even though the expression in his eyes was extremely terrifying, his appearance became more and more seductive and beautiful, almost unlike that of an ordinary person. "If you want me to die, just say one word, it's enough. Do you know? Do you know?" He roared sternly, facing that statue lady. And then, slowly, his voice became softer. "But why? You actually view those things as more important than yourself, more important than your own life." Slowly, he stretched out his hand, gently caressed that face that had weathered countless years of wind and frost, gradually roughened, brushed past the deep memories, that once gentle face. An icy, cold feeling, without a trace of warmth, slowly came from his palm. Opening his arms, gently hugging the statue in his arms, the young man's expression slowly turned into a strange gentleness. The evil shaman stood behind, quietly watching that strange scene. "I know, it is the common people of the world who harmed you." That young man half closed his eyes, softly said, as if he was sleep-talking, "Don't worry, I will let everything be buried with you, and then I will come and find you. You wait for me." The low voice quietly lowered and finally disappeared. The bewitching young man hugged the ice-cold statue. The evil shaman in black stood woodenly. The dark clouds in the sky with a sudden clap of thunder. Raindrops floated down from the horizon. The heavy rain floated down in the wind, making this world hazy. Indistinctly, the evil shaman stared blankly. The raindrops landed on that statue lady's face, silently slid down, like tears. 3,000 miles to the east of Qing Yun Mountain, beside the ancient path that extended southeast from Kongsang Mountain, in the silent wilderness, it was the season where the grass grew tall and the orioles flew. The He family small shop that was one day's journey from Shaoqi town, like in the past, stood alone beside the ancient path, welcoming and sending off the passing travelers. The owner of the small shop, shopkeeper Ho, naturally could not remember how many customers he had welcomed and sent off. As for the passing travelers, naturally there were all kinds of people. But in these 3 days he gradually confirmed, although he was getting older, but most probably he would remember this customer. Actually, to say it was a customer, it was also not accurate. To be honest, it should be a customer with a strange monkey. And to shopkeeper Ho, what left a deep impression on him was that strange three-eyed monkey's usefulness, instead was even greater. 3 days ago, shopkeeper Ho, who was standing outside the shop beside the ancient path and soliciting customers, saw this travel-worn, bewildered man walking over from the ancient path with a three-eyed monkey on his shoulder. For some reason, he felt that he looked familiar. When he went up to welcome him, he wanted to say some extravagant flowery words to pull this customer into the shop to rest, but unexpectedly he only said one sentence. "Customer, our shop has hot tea and good wine. Why don't you rest inside?" Before he could finish his words, that haggard-looking man suddenly disappeared from his sight. The next moment, when shopkeeper Ho recovered his senses, that man was already sitting beside the wooden table in his shop. And on the table, an ingot of silver, enough to eat and drink in this shop for 3 days without stopping. Shopkeeper Ho was naturally delighted, hurriedly served the dishes and wine. Just that out of his expectation, this customer and this monkey really stayed in his little shop like that for 3 days and 3 nights. Until today, they did not seem to have any intention of leaving. That man's mental state was obviously not good. In these 3 days, shopkeeper Ho did not see him speak once, smile once. Each time he served the food and wine, that man only quietly watched the wine pot and then slowly drank. Just that this customer's alcohol tolerance seemed to be extremely poor. Each time he drank a little, shopkeeper Ho estimated that it was not even half a pot. He would collapse on the table, unconscious. And contrary to the owner, the three-eyed monkey that the man brought made shopkeeper Ho dumbstruck. Honestly speaking, shopkeeper Ho's shop here, although the place was secluded, but because there were many customers passing by, he was considered as someone with some knowledge. But in these 3 days, he had already sworn numerous times in his heart that he had really seen the monkey who could drink the most in his entire life, the one with the highest alcohol tolerance. Just in a day and night's time, all the good wine stored in shopkeeper Ho's shop, including the jar of new or Hong liquor hidden under the old locust tree at the back of the shop, were all finished by this monkey. And this monkey evidently still looked like it had not had enough, scratching its ears and cheeks, looking around, jumping for a long time, and calling out to shopkeeper Ho nonstop. Although shopkeeper Ho did not understand the monkey language, but even a fool could tell what the monkey meant. Originally, he did not want to bother, but unexpectedly this monkey was as clever as a ghost, secretly stole the silver that shopkeeper Ho kept and swayed it here and there in front of shopkeeper Ho. Shopkeeper Ho was helpless. Moreover, the other party had already paid enough silver. He could only send his waiter to deliver the wine from Shaoqi town overnight. At the start, he was still rather annoyed, but after a while, he actually started to like this monkey. And other than loving to drink, this three-eyed monkey did not have any other bad traits. Instead, it often played around in the shop. When it was in a good mood, it even did a few acrobatics. For example, it could produce a bunch of flames from its hands out of thin air. Not only shopkeeper Ho's eyes were glued to it, the other customers who passed by for the past few days were also in high spirits. Staying longer in shopkeeper Ho's shop allowed him to earn even more silver. As for the owner of the gray-haired, three-eyed monkey, he was the complete opposite of the lively monkey. Most of the time, he was sleeping, reeking of alcohol. When he woke up once in a while, he would only look around with listless eyes. Occasionally, the monkey would run back to his side. Only then would there be some light in his eyes. He stretched out his hand lazily and patted the monkey's head. Then, he seemed to remember something sad and picked up the wine pot to drink again. After a while, he fell asleep again. Chapter 267. Sometimes shopkeeper Ho also secretly thought, could this man be a lunatic? Just that although he was only an ordinary shopkeeper, but he could still feel that this man was different from other passers-by. Not to mention other things, just the 3 days this man stayed in the small shop, the mosquitoes, which were usually the most abundant at this time of the night, suddenly all disappeared. Furthermore, every night, the ghostly cries which often reverberated in the wilderness outside the shop seemed to be frightened by something, all disappeared. So much so that shopkeeper Ho was used to these ghostly cries and wolf howls. Suddenly it was so quiet these 3 days, he actually could not sleep. This day at dusk, shopkeeper Ho stood behind the shop counter, closed the account book which he had just calculated, and heaved a long sigh. Following which, he looked into his own shop. The setting sun outside the window still had a faint remnant light, at the same time illuminating the horizon red. It also shone in from the shop's windows, elongating the shadows of the tables and chairs on the ground, as if time was also quietly passing by here. Shopkeeper Ho's mood suddenly felt strange, a wave of bewilderment in his heart, calculating he should already be over 50. Although the assistant who helped always said he looked around 40, but he himself knew his body was gradually failing. Time spared no man. Was he going to live like this for the rest of his life? He stared blankly at the gradually elongating shadows on the ground. When he lifted his head, he saw the mottled marks on the 4 walls of the shop. The lonely setting sun, shone on his face, had some inexplicable vicissitudes of life. He sighed, shook his head. These things, better not think about it. Shopkeeper Ho laughed bitterly, picked up the account book, and walked towards the only customer in the shop and his monkey. That customer always sat at the innermost table. Right now, as usual, he was slumped on the table drunk, not moving. And that monkey was squatting on the table, left hand holding the wine pot, right hand grabbing the delicacies from the dishes on the table, drinking a mouthful of wine, eating a mouthful of food, passing the days with relish. Shopkeeper Ho walked over to that customer, coughed once, cleared his throat, but his eyes could not help but glance at that monkey. The three-eyed monkey clearly did not care about his arrival, only glanced at him and again turned its attention back to the wine pot in its hand. Shopkeeper Ho sighed. This monkey was really the only animal he had ever seen that was so addicted to alcohol, and on its back it carried a big wine bag, although it was already shriveled, but one could imagine what was stored in it in the past. Shopkeeper Ho looked away. For some reason, he felt nervous. Even he himself could not explain it. He coughed a few more times and then carefully said, "This, customer." The man in front of him did not move. Shopkeeper Ho was a little embarrassed, but he still continued, "Customer, it's like this. The ingot of silver that you paid 3 days ago has already been used up. Our shop has a small profit margin." Is it she didn't know if the man was really drunk, but he just lay there and didn't move. Shopkeeper Ho sighed, stammered, "Actually, the ingot of silver that customer paid was indeed not little. Not to mention eating in our shop for 3 days. Even if it was for 5 days, it would be enough. Just that your precious animal is really too powerful. Its alcohol tolerance is too big. Just these 3 days, not to mention it has already finished all the wine in our shop. The other 4 vats of wine that were sent over in 2 batches were also finished by it." Speaking till here, Bosso looked at the three-eyed monkey again, only to see the monkey stare at him and make a face. Shopkeeper Ho humbly said, "Can I ask you to pay a little more? Right. The ingot of silver that you paid 3 days ago was also stolen by your precious animal and has not been returned." Before he could finish, suddenly a sound was heard. An ingot of silver bounced twice on the table and appeared before Shopkeeper Ho. Shopkeeper Ho looked intently. It was the monkey who had fished out that stolen ingot of silver from somewhere, throwing his face. Shopkeeper Ho quickly kept it in his bosom, but hesitated for a moment, glanced at that monkey, took out the silver again, pulled open his lapel, and placed it in his inner clothes. Just as he kept the silver and was about to speak to that man again, a voice was suddenly heard from the shop in trance. "Anybody in?" Shopkeeper Ho was surprised, turned back and saw 3 people standing at the entrance, 2 males and a female. The leader was an elderly, holding a bamboo pole in his hand. A piece of white cloth hung on it, written on it, "Immortal Guide for Words." Beside him was a 17 or 18-year-old young lady, her features delicate, a slight smile on her face. Of the 2 of them, the old one had a sage-like demeanor, while the young one was beautiful and delicate. Behind the 2 of them stood a middle-aged man who was holding all of the parcels. However, he had a strange appearance. He was taller than the 2 of them by a head, but his face was like that of a wild dog, making him look disgusting. Shopkeeper Ho hurriedly went up to welcome them. After all, a customer with a monkey obviously would not sneak away. It was better to first greet the new customer. He went up with a smile and said, Yes, 3 customers. Would you like to have a meal or stay?" The elderly leader laughed, squinted his eyes, and said, "Why, Shopkeeper Ho, you don't recognize us." Shopkeeper Ho was stunned, carefully scrutinized that elderly, but no matter how he tried, he could not recall. He was doing business beside this ancient path, and there were so many passers-by. How could he remember them all? He could only awkwardly shook his head and said, "Apologies, customers, I am old and my memory is failing." That elderly looked sympathetic, shook his head, and sighed. Pity. Most of the mortals in the world are like this, with celestial fate in front of them. They have no discerning eyes to know." Shopkeeper Ho was shocked. Immediately a sense of reverence rose in him. Carefully looked at this elderly, saw his white beard fluttering, crane bones, and celestial demeanor. Most likely he was an enlightened master. Although he did not know why an enlightened master looked like a Jianghu fortune teller, and the young lady beside the elderly had a disapproving expression, but since he was an enlightened master, naturally a mortal, would not be able to understand. If he understood, wouldn't he also become an enlightened master? Thinking of that, Shopkeeper Ho's face had already gained some respect, respectfully said, Yes, this customer." "No, master, please come in." The elderly acknowledged, his hand holding the bamboo pole, and swaggered in. The young lady behind him smiled bitterly and shook her head, turned and spoke to the man carrying the bundle behind her. "Wild dog Taoist, let's also go in and rest for a while." That man acknowledged and followed in. The three of them sat at a table. The dog-faced man placed the bundle on the chair beside. A sound was heard. Seemed like the weight was not light. These three people were naturally Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan. As for that dog-faced man, he was the only remaining wild dog Taoist for Bloodforger Hall. Ever since the Battle of Death Marsh, wild dog Taoist followed Tanis Ka and Xiao Huan, roaming the world, the four seas, as his home. At the beginning, Tanis Isian really disliked Wild Dog. Every 2 or 3 days he would pick on Wild Dog. From time to time he would make sarcastic remarks, and Wild Dog Taoist, for some reason, as if he had turned over a new leaf, completely changed into another person, he pretended not to hear and still followed them all the way, and Xiao Huan was kind-hearted, could not stand it, and spoke up to protect him. Although she was young, but her tongue was sharp. Even though Tanis Ka was an experienced Jianghu person, he was often speechless and finally could only accept the fact. Fortunately, after a long time, he gradually discovered that Wild Dog was not completely useless. For example, the heavy items that he usually had to carry could now all be thrown to this coolie, and this coolie, in Xiao Huan's slightly apologetic eyes, did not have the slightest disgust. Instead, he looked very happy. As for other benefits, like encountering wild beasts in the wild, encountering ghosts on the road, encountering strong people when crossing the mountain, etc., etc., naturally, this wild dog hero would be sent to settle them. Along the way, Tanis Ka felt extremely comfortable. He had roamed the world for his entire life and had never walked as comfortably as these few months. He only hated that he did not meet Wild Dog earlier. In this period of time, the three of them revisited the old haunt. Since they were roaming the world, they could go to any place. As they walked and walked, they returned to this ancient path. Luckily, Zhou Yixin was like a shrewd ghost. He still remembered Shopkeeper Ho, a shopkeeper by the roadside, and pretended to be an expert, scaring Shopkeeper Ho into a state of shock. Seeing Shopkeeper Ho was so respectful to him, Tanis Ka was very pleased. He arrogantly ordered a few dishes. When Shopkeeper Ho quickly left to prepare, he then turned back and was about to brag to Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist. Suddenly, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, for some reason, a disbelieving expression appeared on their faces, their eyes staring straight at the ground. Tanis Ka asked curiously, "Hey, what's wrong with you all?" Wild Dog Taoist raised his seemingly heavy arm, pointed to the depths of the shop. "Look for yourself." Tanis Ka stared at him, turned around, and suddenly his body also shook. In the sunset, the last ray of light shone through the window. In the dim corner of the shop, there was a man's figure, and on the table, in the shadows, a three-eyed monkey was looking at them. Xiao Huan was stunned, quietly called out, "Xiao Hui?" Chapter 268. Placing the steaming hot dishes on the table, Shopkeeper Ho retreated behind the counter, opened the account book again, pretended to be doing the accounts. Just that his eyes moved slightly between the lines, he secretly glanced at the customers in the shop. Tanis Ka, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist. The three of them were already sitting at the three-eyed, gray-furred monkey Xiao Hui's table. As for the new dishes, naturally they were also sent to this table, just that they had no appetite. Only Xiao Hui was rather happy, gulping down the wine and eating, looking very happy. Tanis Ka and the rest of their eyes, right now, were not looking at Xiao Hui, but quietly at the other side of the table at the man who was sitting. Xiao Huan was silent for a long time, slowly stretched out her hand, pushed that man, quietly called out, "Ghost." Li. That man's body moved a little from her push, but did not have any reaction. Tanis Ka and Wild Dog glanced at each other. That man's figure and appearance was naturally that ghostly they had seen in the past, just that this figure who once made countless people tremble in fear, right now had become so abject they could not react for a moment. Xiao Huan turned her head, asked in shock, "How did he become like this?" Tanis Ka stared, shrugged his shoulders, said, "Don't ask the two of us." He paused, suddenly frowned, turned to Xiao Hui, who was still sitting on the table, revealed a smile, and said, "Little monkey, what happened to your master?" Xiao Hui's 3 eyes turned at the same time, glanced at this sage-like old man, did not have any other reaction. Only one of its tails stood up, swayed a few times behind it. After a moment, suddenly just sound came out from its mouth, swaggeringly turned its head to drink a mouthful of wine, totally disregarding this old man who looked like a deity. Tanis Ka lost his face, immediately could not hold it, angrily said, "Stupid monkey, dare to show me that face. You are rebelling. If you anger your immortal, wait till I use immortal skills to subdue you and suppress you under Qin Yun Hill. Seal you for 1,800 years. See if you are afraid." Before he finished, Zhou Yixian heard a whistling sound. His vision darkened, as if something was charging towards him. He could not dodge it in time. Xiao Huan, who was beside, also cried out in alarm. Luckily, a hand stretched out from the side and swiftly pushed Zhou Yixian, pushing the old man to the ground. Zhou Yixian was caught off guard and fell on his back. His celestial appearance was almost ruined, but he managed to avoid the thing that was thrown at him. At this time, the object smashed into the air and flew a distance away. With a due sound, it smashed into the wall of the store and fell down. It was the bone of a roasted chicken. Everyone, including shopkeeper Ho, who was watching from afar, turned around and saw the 3-eyed monkey holding a chicken drumstick in its hand, chewing on it happily, not knowing if it threw the bone out with its hand or directly spat it out with its mouth. Zhou Yixian gritted his teeth in hatred, but his experience was after all not to be underestimated. He knew this monkey was a rare spiritual creature, and looking at it, it seemed to have a bad temper, better not to provoke it. Moreover, behind, it was its master Ghostly, who was famous for his thirst for blood. If that guy woke up, it would be even more troublesome. Immediately, he crawled up cursing, rolled his eyes, and angrily said to Wild Dog Taoist, "You are deliberately trying to kill me. Why did you use so much strength to push your immortal?" Wild Dog was speechless. If it was his previous temper, he would have scolded back, just that now his dog eyes turned and actually turned his head away, ignoring Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian was given the cold shoulder. He was even more annoyed and was about to say something when Xiao Huan scolded, "Grandpa!" In recent years, Zhou Yixian was most afraid of this sharp-tongued granddaughter. He immediately stopped, but his mouth was still mumbling something, obviously unwilling. Xiao Huan ignored him, turned and looked at Xiao Hui, revealed a smile and said, "Xiao Hui, do you still remember me? I gave you candied haws to eat." Xiao Hui's eyes looked at Xiao Huan. Its 3 eyes blinked and blinked, suddenly nodded, grinned, and even wagged its tail twice, not knowing if it learned it from that yellow dog, Da Huang, at Qingyun Hill Big Bamboo Valley many years ago. Xiao Huan giggled, said, "Didn't expect you still remember me. Come over," and beckoned to the monkey. Xiao Hui's eyes turned, stretched its hand to its head, looking like it was slightly perplexed, habitually wanted to scratch its head, but unexpectedly one of its hands was holding the wine pot. The other was holding the chicken drumstick. Both were not free, so it might as well use the chicken drumstick to rub its furry head a few times, leaving a few oil stains. Xiao Huan covered her mouth and laughed lightly. Xiao Hui looked at her smile, also grinned, and then slowly moved over, came to the table in front of Xiao Huan, and squatted down. Zhou Yixian, Wild Dog, and shopkeeper Ho, at a distance, all stared. Xiao Huan carefully assessed the monkey, took out a silk handkerchief from her bosom, frowned, and said, "Throw away the thing in your hand." The 3-eyed monkey was startled. It squeaked a few times, clearly not very willing. Xiao Huan lightly patted its head and said, "Quick." Xiao Hui curled its lips, put the drumstick back on the plate, took another look, and was about to put down the wine pot, but suddenly took a big gulp and then put it back on the table. Xiao Huan shook her head and laughed, said, "Why did it become so gluttonous?" After speaking, she pulled both of Xiao Hui's monkey hand in front of her, used the silk handkerchief to carefully wipe away the oil stains on the monkey's hands. Xiao Hui did not move an inch, allowing Xiao Huan to do as she pleased. It was strange, other than its master Ghostly, the monkey only had some good feelings toward a few other females. As for those like Zhou Yixian, Wild Dog, it seemed to never like them. After wiping, Xiao Huan placed the silk handkerchief aside, glanced at Ghostly, who reeked of alcohol, said to Xiao Hui, "How did he become like this?" Xiao Hui scratched its head, started to call out, at the same time waving its arms. The crowd stared at each other. Obviously, no one understood. Xiao Hui seemed to have realized this and stopped. Suddenly, the monkey pointed at Xiao Huan, almost poked Xiao Huan's face. Xiao Huan jumped in fright. Wild Dog Taoist wanted to move. Thought this monkey's wild nature was hard to tame, but unexpectedly he was pulled back by Zhou Yixian. Wild Dog was surprised, looked at Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian quietly said, "Watch first." Xiao Hui at this moment pointed at Xiao Huan, and then its body suddenly somersaulted on the table, jumped to the middle of the table, its mouth noises gesturing at Xiao Huan, and then both of its hands moved from top to bottom along the curve of its body. Xiao Huan was stunned. Zhou Yixian frowned and said, "Woman." Xiao Hui nodded its head repeatedly and then pointed to Ghostly, who had fallen down, both of its hands cupped in a heart shape. Its mouth called out a few times. Suddenly its body fell backwards. Its entire monkey body fell straight down. Xiao Huan suddenly called out, "Careful!" Before she finished, Xiao Hui was too engrossed in its performance. It forgot that this was only a small table. Its bouncing had unknowingly reached the edge of the table. This fall, a sound was heard. It immediately fell under the table. Xiao Huan found it funny and worried, quickly wanted to get up to check, but a sound, the monkey had already scurried up again, both hands on the floor, grinning at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan saw that the monkey did not seem to be injured, and was relieved. She patted its head. Xiao Hui's eyes blinked, looked at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan pondered for a moment, looked at Ghost Li's figure again, turned to Zhou Yixian and said, "Grandpa, he is..." Zhou Yixian frowned and said, "Don't tell me he was injured by a woman? With his current skills and Ghost King sex power, in this world, not many women can do this. Is it Qing Yun sex Shuiwe, or evil sect Huan sex Samyao?" Wild Dog Taoist, who had been sitting at the side, suddenly said, "I don't think so." Zhou Yixian angrily said, "What did you say? Actually dare to say, old man? This immortal is wrong." Wild Dog Taoist did not look at him. A strange expression appeared on his dog face. Looking at that fallen figure, slowly said, "From what I know, he is not the kind of man who places much importance on victory or defeat, and besides, he does not have any injuries on him." Zhou Yixian snorted, disapprovingly said, "That is because your skills and others are too far apart. If it is like you who only know a few tricks, fight and lose, naturally you will not place much importance on victory and defeat. Every day say, victory and defeat are common in military." Chapter 269. Wild Dog Taoist was enraged and was about to retort when Tani glared at them, raised her voice and said, "All right, stop it." Taniska and Wild Dog then stopped at the same time, but still looked at each other angrily. Tani thought for a moment, and then nodded, seemed to have made some decision, and then spoke to the monkey squatting in front of her. "Xiao Hui, all of you come with us first." "What?" Before Xiao Hui could react, Taniska and Wild Dog Tao shouted out first. Their voices were so loud that even Shopkeeper Ho was shocked. Tani glanced at them and said, "What is it?" Wild Dog Taoist for a moment stuttered, mumbled, "He has too many enemies. I'm afraid there will be trouble." Tani said, "I am not even afraid. Were you afraid of?" Wild Dog Taoist was silent, but Taniska beside him could not take it, angrily said to Tani, "We are not running a charity hall. Why are you taking in people all day?" Tani stared at her grandfather, said, "He is not someone else. He saved my life in the Death Marsh." And she suddenly laughed meaningfully and said, "Grandfather, more than 10 years ago you cheated him as good luck in stepping on dog shit. Do you still remember?" Wild Dog Taoist was surprised. Taniska instead blushed, angrily said, "Why are you bringing up the old scores of more than 10 years? Tani snorted, indifferently said, "It's good that you remember. Anyway, I cannot just watch and do nothing." After speaking, she ignored her grandfather and turned to look at Ghostly. When a man's body was gently turned over, a whiff of alcohol hit her. Tani frowned, but on that familiar face, both eyes tightly closed, but his brows were frowned together. Not sure if even when he was drunk, he was still sad. Tani quietly looked at the man's face. Her mind suddenly flashed past that day outside the Death Marsh. This man walked to her fortune-telling stall and quietly said, "You have grown up." Tanizka naturally did not know that his granddaughter was suddenly having wild thoughts, but he knew very clearly that he was going to have another big trouble. Under such circumstances, how could his mood be good? He hatefully turned his head, stared at Ghostly, loudly said, "Shopkeeper, settle the bill." Shopkeeper Ho quickly ran over, smiled and said, "Customer, you are not going to stay for a while." Tanizka grumpily said, "Stay? I have already caused a big trouble by staying for a while. If I stay any longer, I will be troubled to death." Shopkeeper Ho controlled his laughter, said, "Thank you, customer, for silvers." Zhou Yixian mumbled, took out the money from his bosom. Suddenly Xiao Hui scurried over, brought the big wine bag in front of it, and waved it at Shopkeeper Ho. Z, non-stop. Tanizka, Tawny, and the rest were surprised, did not know what the monkey was doing. Instead, Shopkeeper Ho had been with the monkey for 3 days, more or less knew a little. Right now he frowned, pondered for a moment, suddenly said, "Are you going to add wine into the wine bag?" Two. And to Xiao Tian Xiao. Tanizka and others were stunned. After a while, Tawny coughed, laughed dryly, and said, "Shopkeeper, just help it add. Add some wine." Shopkeeper Ho was elated, quickly acknowledged, and went back to get the wine. Speaking of which, this big wine bag was really huge. As the wine was poured in, the wine bag gradually bulged, but Shopkeeper Ho poured in 2 jars of wine, and it was still not full. Xiao Hui was beaming with joy at the side. Zhou Yixian could not bear it anymore. Disregarding his celestial identity, jumped up and angrily said, "Enough, enough." Who? A black shadow flew towards him. Zhou Yixian was now experienced and immediately dodged when he heard the sound. As expected, it was Xiao Hui who threw a dish plate at him. With a pong sound, it smashed onto the ground and broke into pieces. Zhou Yixian was about to speak again. The plates on the table were continuously thrown by Xiao Hui. He dodged left and right and could not be bothered to say anything more. Just that Shopkeeper Ho heard the clear shattering sounds of plates, immediately felt heartache, and looked at the wine bag, which was actually not much left, quickly said, forget it. The remaining wine is my gift. Master Monkey, don't throw the plates this celestial. Just take it as the money for 2 jars of wine." Xiao Hui then stopped. Zhou Yixian stopped, panting heavily, cursing but did not dare to go near that hot-tempered, 3-eyed monkey. Xiao Huan smiled, turned her gaze back to Ghostly, but did not notice that wild dog Taoist, who had not made a sound for a long time, was also staring at Ghostly, his eyes gradually glimmering with a strange glint. Qingyan Hill, Tong Tian Peak. Below the stone steps in front of the Crystal Hall main hall, in the aqua-cold pool, Qingyun Sek's mountain guardian spiritual beast water unicorn leisurely flipped its body in the water. The water waves tumbled, its huge body pressed down on all sides, setting off layers of waves, extremely spectacular. Funxiang Valley disciple Li Sun stared at the jade cold pool for a while, turned his head and smiled. "I have long heard that Qingyun Sek's guardian spiritual beast water unicorn is 1,000 years old spiritual beast. Seeing it now, it really is extraordinary. Li Senior Brother is too kind." A clear laughter came from beside Li Sun. The most famous disciple of Jade and Tongtian Peak, Xiao Yikai, who was accompanying Li Sun, looked at the water unicorn, smiled, and said, "Speaking of venerable spirit, it is the spiritual beast that our sect's Green Leaf Grandmaster tamed back then." Thinking back to the Grandmaster's demeanor back then, it really makes us and the other younger disciples admire it. Li Sun nodded and smiled. He came from a famous good faction sect. His eyes were on top of his head, but towards that brilliant Qingyi founder, he was also full of admiration. Xiao Yikai stretched out his hand and gestured towards a mountain top, said, "Li Senior Brother, please." Li Sun modestly gave way for a moment, walked with Xiao Yikai at the same time. Xiao Yikai said while walking, "I wonder what is the reason for Li Senior Brother's visit this time." Li Sun smiled and said, "Nothing much, just that my teacher has a letter. He wants me to hand it to Reverend Daoxian." Xiao Yikai was surprised, emotionally said, "Why, don't tell me your esteemed Valley Master Yin Elder Senior has already come out from seclusion. A while ago I heard Lu Sweki Jr.'s sister, who just returned from southern border. Yin Elder Sr. is still in seclusion. Li Sun smiled and said, "To be honest, Xiao Senior Brother, my teacher just came out from seclusion a few days ago. I heard from him that he has not seen his Central Plains Reverend Dao Xian, Puhong Master, and other old friends for many years. He is very concerned and had the intention to pay a visit." Xiao Yikai's countenance changed slightly, and then laughed and said, "This can't be any better. Yin Elder Senior's immortal visit. It is really a big matter that our Central Plains good faction has not had for a long time." Li Sun turned and looked. Xiao Yikai looked at him. Both of them stared for a long time, suddenly laughed out loud at the same time, looking extremely delighted. Xiao Yikai grabbed Li Sun's hand, smiled, and said, "Let's go. My teacher is coincidentally chatting with the various teacher uncles in Crystal Hall today. Let me lead the way and introduce Li Senior Brother." Li Sun smiled and said, "Then I will have to trouble Xiao Senior Brother." After a few steps, he seemed to suddenly recall something, said to Xiao Yikai, "All right, Xiao Senior Brother, there's one more thing I want to ask." Xiao Yikai smiled and said, "Li Senior Brother, please speak your mind." Li Sun said, "Previously Qing Yun's sect sent Lu Sweki Jr.'s sister to southern border to visit my teacher." Xiao Yikai's countenance changed slightly, and then returned to normal, but this expression was still seen by Li Sun. Li Sun was moved but continued to speak. "That day when we parted, Lu Jr.'s sister seemed to be slightly injured. Speaking of which, she was injured because she was helping our Funxiang Valley. I feel very uneasy. I wonder if she is well these days." Xiao Yikai thought for a moment, said, "Thank you, Li Senior Brother, for your concern. Lu Jr.'s sister is well. Just nice. Today, Shuiwa teacher uncle also brought her disciples Wenmin and Lu Sweki over. Later you will be able to see her." Li Sun's face could not help but reveal a trace of joy, nodded, and acknowledged. Xiao Yikai looked at his expression, did not speak. Both of them walked up. On the way the topic had changed, all talking about unimportant things. Not long after, both of them had already walked up the stone steps, arrived at Tontian Peak Crystal Hall. A grand scale, imposing enormous building appeared in front of Li Sun. Li Sun stared for a long time, sighed, and said, "I initially thought Funxiang Valley Mountain River Hall. Inferno Altar was already the world's masterpiece. Seeing it today, I then know that there is always someone better. There is always a heaven beyond heaven." Xiao Yikai laughed and said, "Li Senior Brother is too polite. Come this way, please." Li Sun laughed, followed Xiao Yikai over, came to the front of Crystal Hall, took a deep breath, tidied his clothes, and then strode in. Chapter 270. In Crystal Hall, Reverend Doyle Shan wore a dark green Taoist robe, his long beard hanging down to his chest, sat on the main seat of the hall. On both sides of the seats were the heads of other houses of Jadian. 10 years ago, at Jadian Hill Battle, 3 of the 7 houses of Jadian changed their heads. Compared to the time when Sha Danan and Bei first came to Jadian, things were still the same, but the people were different. Apart from Dragon Head Peak's Taoist Master Vas Kalo's position, which was replaced by Kevern, the other 2 peaks changed. Morning Sun Peak's head Shang Zhengliang's position was replaced by his disciple Chu Yuhong, and Sunset Peak's head Master Tian Yun's position was replaced by his junior brother Taoist Master Fei Yun. Among these 3 branches, other than Sunset Peak's Taoist Fei Yun and Reverend Dao Xian, who were of the same generation, they could still exchange a few words. Longshow Peak and Morning Sun Peak's heads were more awkward. Dragon Head Peak Kevern was still all right. After all, he was one of the best among the younger generation. He was still familiar with the teachers. As for Sunrise Peak Chu Yuhong, he sat silently at the back, did not speak from beginning to end. And those older generation heads, Big Bamboo Valley Tian Belize, Small Bamboo Valley Master Shuiwa Master, and Return of the Wind Valley Zing Shuchong, had not seen each other for a long time, and the few heads who usually quarreled with them were not there. The atmosphere in the hall was more harmonious than before. Behind Shuiwa Master stood Ainin and Wenmin. After not seeing each other for a period of time, Ainin's face was still as beautiful as before. Her face did not show joy or anger, but for some reason, her body faintly exuded a slight chill that was not usually seen. As for Wenmin, she also stood behind Shuiwa Master, But her eyes were not so honest. From time to time she glanced sideways, most likely saw Xavion, who was standing behind Tianbelis. Every time Xavion saw this, he could not help but smile, looked quite simple and honest, when men glared at him, and then turned back. Next to Tianbelis, his wife Suru also came over, called Tianlinger, who came with Kaheo to her side. Mother and daughter spoke quietly. Not seeing each other for a long time, both of them seemed to have endless things to talk about. And following Kaheo, other than Tianlinger, was his junior brother Linjingyu. Right now, he was standing at the back, together with Return of the Wind Valley head Zheng Shuchang's son Zheng Shishu. They had experienced the Death Marsh battle together, and could be considered to be friends. This Qingyun gathering was also not a formal occasion. Most of the people were more relaxed. Even Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui, Zheng Shuchang, Shuiwen Master, and the rest conversation content was also rather relaxed. Other than the usually cold Shuiwe, the rest of the people's faces mostly carried smiles. When Funxiang Valley Li Sun walked into the Crystal Hall, what he saw before his eyes was such a scene, just that the next moment his eyes were on that frosty lady, flickering like a flame. Xiao Yikai walked up and said to Reverend Daoxian, "Master, Li Sun, Li's senior brother, is here." Reverend Daoxian smiled and looked over. Li Sun walked to Xiao Yikai's side, bowed to Reverend Daoxian, said, "Funxiang Valley Junior Li Sun greets Reverend Daoxian." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Forget it, quickly get up." Li Sun obeyed and got up, and then cupped his hands and bowed to the surroundings, said, "Junior Li Sun greets Qin Yun's senior's teacher uncles." Tian Bui, Zheng Shuchang, and the rest all nodded in acknowledgement. Reverend Daoxian said, "Your master is still well, not seen for many years. I wonder how Yun brother's situation is. Some time ago I heard that Yun Valley Master suddenly went into seclusion. I was really worried for a while." Xiao Yikai had already walked to stand beside Reverend Daoxian, heard those words, smiled, and said, "Master, you don't know, just now I heard Li's senior brother said, Yun Senior has already come out of seclusion." Reverend Daoxian was slightly surprised. "Ah," said to Li Sun, "really, nephew?" Li Sun respectfully said, "It is indeed so. My master indeed came out of seclusion a few days ago, and specially sent a disciple to visit sect head Daoxian. There's also a letter ordered me to pass it to Reverend." After speaking, he took out a sealed envelope from his bosom and passed it to Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian took the letter. After a moment, tore open the seal, took out the thin letter paper, read it carefully from beginning to end. Everyone's eyes were on his face. Only Reverend Daoxian's expression was the same as usual, without any change. Nobody could tell what ups and downs he was feeling. After a while, Reverend Daoxian finished reading the letter, slowly kept the letter paper, put it back into the envelope, stroked it for a moment, placed it on the tea table beside him. Li Sun carefully looked at Reverend Daoxian, but did not hear what the so-called number one person of the good faction had to say. He couldn't help but feel uneasy. Reverend Daoxian pondered for a long time. His eyes swept across, glanced at Shuiwen Master. Shuiwen Master seemed to sense something, frowned. Reverend Daoxian looked away, coughed once, looked at Li Sun, who was still standing below. His face again revealed an amiable smile, smiled and said, "Nephew, before you came to Qin Yun, did Yun Valley Master instruct you anything?" Li Sun hesitated for a moment, cupped his fists, and said, "Respected teacher once instructed, Qin Yun's sect, Reverend Daoxian, is the current good faction's giant. Disciple came to Qin Yun to pay respects to Reverend and wanted to have a good look before returning to Funxiang Valley. I will listen to Reverend's instructions." Reverend Daoxian was surprised and then laughed in spite of himself, said, "This teacher of yours is really sly, whatever difficult questions are thrown to me." Speaking, he paused for a moment and then nodded and said, "How about this? Your teacher also said in the letter, at most within 3 days, he will also lead Funxiang Valley disciples to Central Plains. Most likely they will first reach our Qingyun Hill. Before that, you can temporarily stay at our Qingyun Hill for a few days." Li Sun was delighted, quickly said, "Yes, disciple obeys." Reverend Daoxian nodded slightly, and then seemed to recall something, turned and spoke to Lu Sweki, who was standing behind Shuiwen Master. "Sweki." Lu Sweki did not expect Reverend Daoxian to suddenly call her, was surprised, and then stood up, bowed, and said, "Sect head teacher uncle, disciple is here." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "You, in Funxiang Valley Li Sun senior brother, are considered old acquaintances. I remember these few years you have met many times. How about this? These few days, I will trouble you to bring him around Qingyun Hill. Don't lose the etiquette of hospitality." Lu Sueki frowned, turned and looked at her teacher, Shuiwen Master. Saw Shuiwen Master also frowning, her eyes looking at Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian looked back at her, his eyes filled with inquiry. Shuiwen Master sighed in her heart, spoke to Lu Sueki indifferently. "Since sect head teacher uncle has instructed, you are more familiar with him, bring him around." Lu Sueki's lips moved, slowly lowered her head. After a moment, quietly said, "Yes, disciple will obey teacher's command." Li Sun was overjoyed but maintained a smile on his face, said to Lu Sueki, "Thank you, junior sister." Lu Sueki nodded slightly, but did not show any other expression. Reverend Daoxian smiled and nodded. Zheng Shuchong, Tian Bui looked over, but did not say anything. Instead, Tian Bai's wife, Suru, glanced over from her conversation with her daughter Tian Linger, frowned slightly. This gathering ended after a long while. Tian Bui brought his wife, Suru, eldest disciple Xavion, out of Tong Tian Peak Crystal Hall. Xavion followed his teacher out, but could not help but secretly turn back to look. This action was seen by Tian Linger, who was walking out to send her father and mother, suddenly burst out laughing. Hearing the laughter, Tian Bui and Suru both turned back. Suru glanced at her daughter, smiled, and said, "What are you laughing at?" Tian Linger walked to her mother's side, pulled Suru's hand, glanced sideways at big senior brother. Xavion felt guilty, immediately blushed. Tian Bui snorted, said, pretending to be mysterious, "What's wrong?" Tian Linger smiled and said, "Father, mother, both of you better quickly help big senior brother to go to Small Bamboo Valley. Find Shuiwe teacher uncle to propose marriage. If not, he will really be anxious to death." Tian Bui was surprised. Suru was far more quick-witted than her husband, reacted earlier, smiled, and said to Xavion, "What? So you already have someone in your heart, and it is even my Shuiwe senior sister's Small Bamboo Valley disciple. Come, tell teacher wife, I will decide for you." Xavion opened his mouth to speak, unexpectedly glanced at Tian Bui, could not say anything, and could only lower his head. Suru was startled, said, "What's wrong, Darren?" Tian Linger giggled, said, "Isn't big senior brother afraid that father will scold him? I will speak on his behalf." Xavion was a little nervous, opened his mouth, and said, "Little junior sister." Tian Linger ignored him, spoke to Suru on her own. "The one big senior brother has his eyes on is Shuiwe teacher uncle's disciple, one min senior sister." Tian Bui snorted again. His expression was eccentric. Suru instead laughed out, said, "Good lad, at least you have some foresight. One min that girl is indeed not bad, but is uncertain what her own thoughts are. I also cannot just—" Xavion was anxious, raised his head and said, She is also the same." Before he finished, he saw his teacher wife, and little junior sister were all looking at him. Their expressions like a smile, yet not a smile. He was embarrassed and could not continue, could only lower his head again. Suru shook her head with a wry smile, said, Forget it. You this fellow learned your teacher's foresight. Why don't you learn his thick-skinned?" Tianbi suddenly coughed at the side, glared over. Suru instead ignored him, said to Xavion, "Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. Teacher wife, as long as the girl is willing, your wish will be fulfilled." Chapter 271. Xavion was overjoyed, his face immediately beaming. Tian Bui snorted coldly, said, "Look at you." Xavion was startled, quickly kept his smile, stood behind his teacher, but the smile on his face could not be concealed. Suru smiled and shook her head, pulled her daughter aside, urged her for a while, then came back, together with Tian Bui and Xavion, rode their swords, and flew back to Bamboo Valley, passing through the clouds and mist as fast as lightning. After about an hour, the three of them returned to Bamboo Valley. Tian Bui did not speak after landing, walked straight to observe Silence Hall. Suru turned and said to Xavion, "You go and rest first. You don't have to worry about that matter." Xavion could not help but giggle again, quickly saluted, then strode back. Suru smiled and shook her head, slowly walked back to observe Silence Hall, saw Tian Bui sitting in the hall, walked over, smiled, and said, "Hey, that eldest disciple you are so proud of, you have to go and propose to my Shui West senior sister yourself." Tian Bui snorted, turned his head, said, "Want me to beg your senior sister humbly? I won't go." Suru was not angry, only smiled and said, "Then your eldest disciple wants to be a bachelor for life. I don't care." Tian Bai's face revealed a trace of disdain, looked up at the sky, said, "I also can't be bothered. Anyway, I am not going to be a bachelor for life." Suru could not help but burst out laughing again, stretched out her hand and lightly hit Tian Bui, said, "Really, don't you see how old you are? Still so frivolous." Tian Bui blinked his eyes, but still looked up at the sky, a heart of stone, not shedding tears when seeing the coffin, not turning back when kicked to Nanshan. Suru had no choice, could only say, "All right, to be serious. It is not easy for your disciple to find someone he likes, and besides, one min that lady is really not bad. I also like her. You only need to go to Bamboo Valley and talk to my Shuewa senior sister, with me by your side, and most you will only suffer some superficial gossip. What's that? Since when Min has some feelings for our Darren, my senior sister will not ruin her disciple's life just because of a little unhappiness with you." Tian Bai's face darkened for a long while, angrily said, "I knew boss is a good-for-nothing, really, actually fancied small Bamboo Heights people, making me at such an old age still have to suffer Shueyu, that damned woman's anger." Suru spat, said, "I am also from small Bamboo Valley. Why did you also fancy me? Look at you. Now you still want to bring up old scores with me." Tian Bui was speechless for a moment, resentfully said, Forget it. Anyway, I have already accepted my fate. A bunch of useless fellows. I will make a trip to small Bamboo Height." Suru then nodded and smiled. "That's more like it." After speaking, she put the matter aside, walked to the side, but after a few steps, suddenly stopped again. When she turned around, her brows slightly frowned, as if recalling something, said to Tian Bui, "Oh, right, when you saw that Funxiang Valley Li Sun today, did you feel something was wrong?" Tian Bui indifferently said, "You mean sect head senior brother let small Bamboo Valley Lu Sweki to receive him?" Suru nodded, said, "You also felt something was wrong?" Tian Bui snorted, said, "There is nothing wrong. If there is really a problem, that senior sister of yours would have coldly rejected. But you see she did not make any sound. It could be seen that at least sect head senior brother had told her about this. That senior sister of yours also agreed." Suru was surprised, then nodded, said, "Oh, you are right. I did not think of this, but senior sister had always doted on Lu Sweki. How could?" Tian Bui coldly said, "Is at least Sun very bad? In her eyes, most likely much better than our disciples." Suru was surprised, said, "Everything was fine. Why did you talk about this?" Tian Bai's lips moved, casually said, "That year at EC Lubo Hill, that stormy night, I punished Lao Chi. She is not." When he spoke till here, he suddenly realized, stopped but for some reason, shook his head, sighed. Suru frowned, said, "The more you speak, the stranger it is. You even drag Xiao Fan into it. What is going on?" Tian Bui suddenly seemed to lose interest, shook his head and said, "Don't ask." Suru knew her husband's temper and kept quiet. Just at this time her thoughts were suddenly stirred. Couldn't help but sigh, said, "It has been 10 years. I wonder how Xiao Fan is now." Tian Bui was silent for a long time, slowly stood up, coldly said, "Haven't you heard? He is now Ghost King's sect vice head. Changed his name to Ghostly. Known as Shui Gongzi. Very powerful." Suru lowered her head, slowly sat down on the chair beside. After a long time, she quietly said, "AI, that year when he first came to our sect. Although he looked stupid, but..." She did not continue. After a long time, softly said, "Originally such a good child. To you, to me, he was very respectful, but now. He ended up being expelled from the sect." A flash of anger flashed past Tian Bai's face, suddenly loudly said, "If they want to expel, then so be it. I did not say to expel this disciple." Suru stood up at once, interrupted her husband's words, shouted Bui. Tian Bui glanced at his wife, did not continue, but his expression became even more indignant, suddenly stamped his feet, with a heavy sound, strode to the back of Observe Silence Hall. Suru silently looked at her husband's back figure and then quietly sighed, turned and looked outside. Looking out from the Observe Silence Hall's main door, the warm sunlight warmly shone on Big Bamboo Valley. In the distance, indistinctly the secluded kitchen, a corner of the eaves revealed behind the trees. The house was still there, but the person was gone. Suru quietly watched for a while, shook her head, turned, and also walked into the Observe Silence Hall's rear hall. The night gradually approached. The sky was filled with layers of dark clouds, pressing down very low, making it hard to breathe. Under such circumstances, no stars and no moon. At the foot of the barren mountain, only on a slope leeward from the wind, a bonfire was lit. Tanis Isian and the rest, along with the newly joined Ghost Li and Monkey Xiao Hui, walked along the ancient path. This day they arrived at the foot of Kongseng Mountain. The sky was already dark. They started a bonfire at this leeward place and prepared to spend the night in the wilderness. Although he had been out for many years and was long used to these things, once Tanis Isian sat down, he still cried out in pain, continuously used his hands to hit his waist and back, as if his waist was about to break. Helplessly, the rest ignored him. After crying for a while, unavoidably bored, he also slowly stopped. Xiaohuan squatted beside the bonfire, placed her hands on the fire to warm herself. Wild Dog Taoist put down Ghost Li and the many packages, walked to the bonfire. This was the real panting. In the group, Xiao Hui was the most energetic. Once it landed on the ground, it looked around, jumping here and there. Ever since Xiaohuan decided to bring Ghostly away, for a very long time, Ghostly was like this and did not wake up. Occasionally he would wake up and look at the people around him, turn a blind eye, called Xiao Hui over, opened the wine bag on its back, and kept drinking. After a while, he actually passed out drunk again, really leading a befuddled life. Along the way, Wild Dog Taoist, other than the packages, had another task of carrying Ghostly, and most of the time Xiao Hui would jump on a Ghostly's back, making him even heavier. If not for the fact that he had been practicing Taoism for some time, normal people would really not be able to withstand it. This time Wild Dog Taoist panted for a long time, looked around. Tanis Kai had been mumbling for a long time. He was probably tired and lay down beside with his clothes on. Xiaohuan was lying not far from the bonfire. As for the unconscious Ghostly, because Wild Dog Taoist had intentionally or unintentionally placed him at a further place, right now the firelight could not reach that place. Only a blurry shadow could be seen, and that three-eyed monkey beside him. By now no one knew where. Most likely it had run off to find some wild fruits to eat. Along the way, Xiao Hui was often like this. Wild Dog sat quietly in front of the bonfire. The surroundings gradually quietened down. Tanis Ka's loud cries slowly sounded. Xiaohuan's body slightly moved up and down. Seemed like she had also fallen asleep. The firelight reflected on Wild Dog's face, making his expression uncertain, also contrasting the strange glint in his eyes. After a long time, he suddenly raised his head, looked at that tall and precipitous in the night, the rocks towering like a night demon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws at Kongseng Mountain. That place was originally his Blood Forger Hall's sacred place. And right now, Blood Forger Hall had already turned into ashes, leaving only him like a lonely wild ghost. He slowly turned back, that unconscious drunk man in the night shadows, lying motionless in the distance. Wild Dog Taoist breathed deeply, his hand subconsciously stretched to his waist, holding on to his Beast Fong magical weapon. Then he slowly got up, walked towards Ghostly. The firelight shone on his back, making his shadow longer and longer, gradually enveloping Ghostly lying on the ground. The next moment, he stood before Ghostly. Chapter 272. Gray light, gently emitted from the edge of the cold beast's tooth, brushed past Wild Dog Taoist's face. The man lying in front of him was the murderer who destroyed Blood Forger Hall with his own hands. His eyes glimmered, seemed to be fighting with some thoughts, just that this was a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity. Usually what kind of person was Ghostly? Wild Dog Taoist did not even dare to think that he would be able to kill this man, but this time he seemed to have lost his will. It was a good opportunity to exact vengeance. A fierce glint flashed in Wild Dog Taoist's eyes. The beast-toothed magical weapon struck down. The sound of the wind rustled. Suddenly a slight, sharp, piercing sound broke the silence of this late night. The magical weapon had yet to reach him. The wind had already blown onto that dispirited man. His messy hair scattered on his forehead was blown away, revealing his closed eyes' face. His face looked a little pale. Wild Dog Taoist suddenly had such a thought. In his entire life, he had never seen such a strange man like Ghostly. He also did not know what exactly was it that could make this man who looked extremely strong feel like he was dying. Just that, he also did not want to know. In his heart, Bloodforger Hall had always been a very important existence. This importance even far surpassed Nien Leader and the rest who were originally in charge of Bloodforger Hall. Therefore, after being forced into a desperate situation by Ghostly, Nien Leader and the rest succumbed, but only Wild Dog Taoist unexpectedly persisted. And now, it was a great opportunity for revenge. Wild Dog Taoist had already started to imagine the scene of blood spurting out, splashing on his face. At that moment, he suddenly thought, if he killed this man, Xiao Huan behind him, would she be sad and upset? Maybe she would ignore me from now on. After all, between Xiao Huan and Ghostly, there was a past that Wild Dog Taoist did not know, but looking at Xiao Huan's insistence to bring Ghostly along to take care of him, he knew the relationship between them. Wild Dog Taoist did not know why. His mind was in a mess in that moment. Innumerable thoughts flashed past his mind. But that beast tooth, in the end, still pierced through the air. Watching, it was about to reach that dispirited man's throat, about to pierce in. A huge arm suddenly stretched out from the darkness. Noiselessly, like a ghost, suddenly appeared before Wild Dog Taoist. That enormous hand, before Wild Dog Taoist could react, abruptly grabbed Wild Dog Taoist's Beast Fang weapon in his hand. The Beast Tooth's powerful force still pushed the huge hand down by a little, but it was only this little distance, after which the entire Beast Tooth, like cast iron, was gripped by the huge hand, unable to move, stopped at Ghostly's throat, almost pierced through his neck, but no matter how Wild Dog Taoist tried to cast his spells, he was unable to go any further. Wild Dog Taoist turned pale with fright, looked up. The next moment he felt his blood turning cold. In the darkness above him, 3 balls of burning flames appeared, forming a triangle shape. Especially that ball of flame at the top, indistinctly had a solemn golden color and a strange, ferocious blood-red color. Wild Dog Taoist, even if he racked his brains, he could not understand why the golden color, which represented the subduing evil ability, and the blood-sucking red could be mixed together, but right now he knew. This monster in the darkness with just one hand could grab his beast tooth. This level of skills was definitely not something he could match. And in the surrounding shapeless darkness, suddenly there seemed to be a silent roar, like some strange beast roaring. In a blink the darkness charged up, looking like it was about to swallow him up. Wild Dog Taoist did not dare to stay any longer, almost subconsciously let go of the beast tooth magical weapon. With a turn he flew out. At that instant, a piercingly cold, strong wind came down from above, smashed a huge pit where he was standing, made a deafening sound. The entire small hill seemed to shake. Far away, Taniska and Xiao Huan were startled by the commotion at the same time, looked over and saw Wild Dog Taoist's body flew back, landed near the fire. After landing, he still could not stand steadily, staggered and retreated a few steps. And on his face, a terrified expression. His mouth hoarsely said, "Monster! Monster!" Taniska and Xiao Huan looked back at the same time. The next moment their countenances also changed. In that darkness, at the place where Ghostly was lying, in the darkness, a huge figure slowly appeared, both feet on the ground, both arms over the knees. At a glance it was at least 4, 5 zhongs tall, far taller than everyone there. They slowly looked up. In the end, they could only look up. And at that highest point, 3 balls of burning flames were the monster's eyes. Huge and sharp fangs appeared in its mouth. Its muscular body everywhere seemed to be filled with murderous intent. Taniska inhaled a breath of cold air, quietly said, "Three-eyed spear, and no, it's three-eyed fierce monkey." Xiao Huan was surprised, said, "Grandpa, what did you say? Don't tell me it is Xiao Hui." Taniska snorted, pulled Xiao Huan and retreated. His mouth instead angrily said to Wild Dog Taoist, "What did you do? Want to anger this monster?" Wild Dog Taoist was silent. Tannis Ka saw him like this, became even more furious, was about to scold. Suddenly a roar was heard ahead. It was the three-eyed, fierce monkey. Its huge body suddenly leapt up. The next moment the wind howled, a shadow shrouded over. Tannis Ka and the rest turned pale, fled in all directions, and Xiao Hui, who had transformed into a huge ape, seemed to be enraged by Wild Dog Taoist's attempt to harm its master. Its eyes glinted fiercely, attacked mercilessly. The three of them barely dodged. Xiao Hui's huge hand had already smashed down. With a bang, another large pit appeared on the thick ground. Even the bonfire at the side was immediately scattered by the huge force. The ashes from the fire flew all over the sky, illuminating Xiao Hui's huge body like a legendary demon. Wua! The enraged huge beast roared, waved its right hand. A gray light flashed. Like the wind and lightning, it charged towards Wild Dog Taoist. In a blink, it was already in front of Wild Dog. Wild Dog Taoist felt a strong gust of wind hitting his face. Before it reached his body, the force almost tore his skin. In a great shock, he desperately dodged to the side. His body had just moved when he felt a pain on his back. That gray light brushed past his back. Wild Dog Taoist's body shook greatly. Felt a strong force surging from behind. A sweet taste in his throat. A mouthful of blood was already spurted out. From the corner of his eyes, he saw that gray light. It was his own Beast Fong magical weapon. Without waiting for him to laugh bitterly, the huge ape's huge body suddenly appeared above him. Crashing down, Wild Dog Taoist still wanted to avoid, but his body felt numb and could not move. He could only heave a long sigh, close his eyes, and await death. Seeing that Xiao Hui was about to tear Wild Dog Taoist into pieces, its huge body crashing down from the sky, Tannis Ka and Xiao Huan stood stunned, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Xiao Hui's body underwent a strange change. Its huge body suddenly tilted to the back, and then with a very strange and comical posture, with a plop, buttocks facing down, sat on the ground. Pong! This sitting was still full of vigor, awe-inspiring. Xiao Hui made a sound, obviously also bewildered. Its huge hand scratched its head, turned to look. Tannis Ka and Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog Taoist, who had luckily escaped, also looked over at the same time. Ghostly, who had awoken, suddenly appeared behind Xiao Hui, a desolate expression on his face. His right hand grabbed onto Xiao Hui's tail. Most likely it was him who at that critical moment pulled Xiao Hui down from the sky and saved Wild Dog Taoist's life. Xiao Hui's three eyes blinked, suddenly growled a few times at this man who was only half its height. Ghostly instead shook his head gently. Xiao Hui's body suddenly swayed. The next moment, bones cracking sounds were heard. In front of Zhou Yixian and the rest's dumbstruck eyes, the huge ape suddenly shrunk. In a short while, the huge body again turned into that adorable three-eyed monkey, looked around for a moment, with a sound scurried back to Ghostly's shoulder. Ghostly slowly stretched out his hand, stroked the monkey's head. Xiao Hui's three eyes rolled, looked like it was unwilling, called out twice, at the same time pointed at Wild Dog Taoist. Wild Dog Taoist was shocked but realized Ghostly was also looking at him, and then heard him saying, "You want to kill me?" Wild Dog Taoist's expression fluctuated, uncertain, and felt Xiao Huan's surprised gaze, but for some reason, under that gaze, he felt an indescribable sorrow. His mouth involuntarily shouted, "That's right, I want to kill you. You annihilated my blood forger hall, killed so many of my fellow disciples. Today, I am avenging you. Shouldn't I?" Ghostly did not speak, only coldly looked at him. Instead, Xiao Hui on his shoulder quietened down, made a sound, like it was mocking Wild Dog. Wild Dog felt uneasy being stared at by Ghostly, and Xiao Huan's silence made him even more uneasy. Under the torture, he clenched his teeth, angrily said, "If you want to kill, then kill. What are you looking at?" Chapter 273. Ghostly slowly retracted his gaze from that outwardly fierce but inwardly cowardly Wild Dog. The expression on his face also gradually changed. Some desolation, some loneliness, some heartache, some pain. Why would I kill you? If killing can save her, even if I have to kill everyone in the world, I would have done it long ago. He quietly muttered to himself, his voice light and fleeting. 10 years, other than killing, what else have I done? What exactly am I still alive for? His face desolate, His body slowly turned, ignoring the others, left alone. Wild Dog Taoist was stunned. Xiao Huan, who was standing beside him, suddenly changed her expression, actually ran after him. Tanis Isian was shocked, quickly stretched out his hand to catch up, but unexpectedly he caught nothing. Xiao Huan jogged up to Ghost Li, grabbed Ghost Li's hand, said, "What happened to you? Where are you going?" When Ghost Li was questioned by her, for a moment he felt the entire heaven and earth shook. Only those 4 words resounded. "Where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going?" Where can I go?" This man suddenly lifted his head, looked up at the firmament. That pitch-black sky canopy, black and deep, endless, without a trace of light. The darkness that covered the sky and covered the earth, like covering the sky and covering the earth, rushed down, drowning his figure. Where should I go in the darkness?" a soft voice quietly asking. Southern border, 7-mile cave. A sorrowful atmosphere enveloped the entire valley. Numerous Miao people surged over from all directions, standing on both sides of the path that led to the altar halfway up the mountain. The elderly, children, strong men, women. In everyone's eyes, endless sorrow. Some of the women started to cry slowly, very soon. Choking sounds were heard from the crowd. Qinglong followed behind the Miao tribe leader Tu Ma Gu, solemnly holding the small blue and white urn containing the ashes of the deceased great shaman, unhurriedly walked towards the altar. Pairs of eyes were all on that small blue and white urn. The young men clenched their fists, the women were crying, and the elderly's faces, only desolation. Tribe leader Tu Ma Gu also remained silent, his face gloomy, but he was clearly more able to accept this fact than the other Miao people. Passing through the crowd, passing through the sorrowful gazes, the mountain breeze blew gently, brushing past the small urn. There seemed to be a soft sound, like singing, like gratification. This was their homeland. Qinglong was someone who had seen countless grand occasions, but at this moment, his face was solemn and respectful. Step by step behind tribe leader Tu Ma Gu, walked to the altar halfway up the mountain. On the platform in front of the altar stood a circle of magi. The older ones had white hair, while the younger ones still had black hair. However, their eyes were filled with the same reverence. The sorcerer, who seemed to be the oldest, slowly walked up and bowed deeply to the azure dragon, saying a few words in the Miao language. Qinglong did not dare to be negligent and replied respectfully, just that he did not understand the southern border Miao language, so he turned and looked at the tribe leader Tu Ma Gu. Tu Ma Gu whispered, "This is the Aries shaman. He is now the leader of the shamans in the altar. He sends his regards to you and is extremely grateful that you have brought back the revered great shaman's remains." Qinglong solemnly said, "The great shaman is highly respected and has done his best for our Ghost King sect. What I have done is my duty." Tu Ma Gu softly translated his words to the Aries shaman. The Aries shaman nodded his head, walked up to Qinglong, and stretched out both of his hands. Qinglong solemnly handed the small urn in his hands to him. The Aries shaman solemnly received it. The moment he received it, the surrounding shamans suddenly broke the silence and started chanting a strange scripture in the Miao language, their voices indistinct, illusory, and unreal, like the whispers of spirits, like the chill of the cold moon. The chanting gradually became louder, reverberated far away, reverberating in the mountains of the 7-mile cave. At the foot of the mountain, among the crowd, another cry was heard. The Aries shaman bowed to Qinglong, and Tu Ma Gu turned and carried the small urn into the altar. The rest of the shamans followed behind. Qinglong watched all of this, his ears still reverberating with the sobbing sounds. He could not help but heaved a long sigh. Tu Ma Gu's face dimmed, quietly said, "The entire Miao tribe, thank you, honorable envoy, for sending the great shaman back to his hometown." Qinglong solemnly said, "Tribe leader is too courteous. The great shaman has done great kindness to our Ghost King sect. Our reverence for the senior is not inferior to all of you. Our sect, Ghost King, actually wanted to personally escort the great shaman back, but unfortunately, he really had something on and could not do it, especially entrusted me to apologize to all of you." Tu Ma Gu nodded his head and said, "Ghost King Master is too courteous. I dare not accept it. Honorable envoy, this way please." After speaking, he stretched out his hand and invited Qing Long to walk into the altar. Qing Long was surprised, secretly felt strange. He thought that the altar was an important place and not accessible to outsiders. Could it be that this tribe leader still had something to say to him? Just that while he was thinking, his feet still walked over. As expected, only two Magu accompanied Qing Long into the altar. The other Miao warriors behind him did not follow, and the group of shamans were nowhere to be seen. Most likely they had walked deeper into the altar. Seeing that there was no one around, two Magu stopped. Qing Long also stopped, looked at this Miao tribe leader, whose expression was complicated, quietly said, "Why? Tribe leader, don't tell me there is something else." Two Magu hesitated for a moment, said, "I indeed have one more matter, would like to ask honorable envoy." Qing Long said, "Please speak." Two Magu said, "That young man who came to our Miao tribe 7 Mile Cave and invited the great shaman over, I wonder how is he now?" Qing Long was surprised. Ghost Li's figure flashed past his mind. After a moment of hesitation, said, "To be honest, tribe leader, that young man is our Ghost King's sect vice head, but right now he is overwhelmed with grief. Very few people know where he went." Two Magu's face revealed a disappointed expression, but then his face turned solemn. After a long silence, said, "Then I will have to trouble honorable envoy if you have the chance to meet him. Please pass on my words." Qing Long felt uneasy but still nodded and said, "Tribe leader, please speak." Two Magu's eyes gazed into the dark depths of the altar. His voice also became erratic, said, "Please pass on. That day in the southern border's 7 Mile Cave altar, an old man's request to him. Hope he will remember it in his heart." Qing Long frowned. He was also an intelligent person. After hearing it once, he knew most likely Ghostly had promised the Miao tribe something. That was why the great shaman decided to disregard everything to save Bayao. A pity Ghostly was not here. If not, he would really want to ask, what was the matter that was so important? Thinking like that in his heart, Qing Long did not show it on his face, only solemnly nodded and said, "Tribe leader, don't worry. I will definitely pass it." Two Magu sighed and was about to say something when suddenly outside the altar, a shrill whistle was heard from afar. The howl seemed to come from the horizon, uninterrupted, but the oppressive sound seemed to come from the 9 netherworlds, filled with murderous intent, and in an unfathomable ferocity, rolling over. In that instant, under this clear sky and bright sun, the entire 7 Mile Cave mountains were filled with ghostly cries, innumerable ferocious beasts roaring and roaring. The sounds shook the valleys, thunders rumbled, like huge waves of the sea, swallowing this small island of 7 Mile Cave. Two Magu's countenance suddenly changed. Even Qing Long's countenance also changed slightly. Both of them dashed out of the altar at the same time. The sky above the 7 Mile Cave, the original azure blue sky, had already been covered by the dark clouds. The ear-piercing howl was still rumbling unceasingly. The dark clouds rolled over and over. The Miao people at the foot of the mountain were panic-stricken. Children, women, and children were screaming loudly. Gusts of wind coldly blew out from the dark clouds in the sky, like a proud demon, grinning hideously at the ground. The galloping footsteps finally neared. The first enormous figure appeared on the distant mountaintop. The white bones were particularly dazzling under the black clouds, but the 3 pairs of colorful wings on its back were strangely beautiful. However, such beautiful wings were growing on the body of a giant snake that only had white bones left except for its head. It looked especially terrifying. A close to 3 zhang long white-boned snake flapped the 3 pairs of wings on its back. The tongue on the snake's head kept on flicking in and out, spitting out waves of black gas. The next moment, from behind this white-boned snake beside it, even the undulating mountain ranges on the surrounding valleys and peaks of the 7 Mile Cave, in the endless ghostly cries, numerous strange demonic beasts and races surged out, shrieking, grinning hideously, brandishing their weapons and claws, charged down from the mountain, pouncing into this valley towards the terrified people. And at this moment, in the horizon, in the whistling of the wind, suddenly a thunderclap exploded. The rumbling, deafening sound like waves rolling over and over, shook the heaven and earth, mixed with that indistinct roar. Linglong. Chapter 274. Qing Yunhil. Tong Tian Peak, Founder's Ancestral Hall. That old man guarding the Ancestral Hall, right now, was still holding his broken broom, standing at the entrance of the hall, looking out. His wrinkled face faintly revealed a strange expression. It seemed to be a little expectant, but also a little excited. The empty space outside the hall, not a soul in sight, but if one looked carefully, one would discover that around this empty space, there were many more strange talismans than usual, either stuck on the surrounding tree trunks or hidden under the bushes and stones. Each talisman paper was about half a zhang apart, seemingly unconnected, but in fact indistinctly formed a mysterious formation, isolating this empty space from the surroundings. The warm sunlight shone down from the sky. Inside and outside the formation, there was no difference at all. The same place was bathed in the sunlight. Just at the next moment, suddenly a sharp sound was heard from above that empty space. The old man standing at the entrance of the Founder's Ancestral Hall looked up. The hand that was holding the broom subconsciously tightened. A strange darkness suddenly appeared above this empty space. In a blink shrouded the sky above the empty space, instantly tainted the surroundings with a heavy, austere atmosphere. However, this darkness only existed in this empty space. To be more precise, it existed in the formation formed by the surrounding talismans. It was obvious that this strange formation was set up by an expert to bind this power within. The black gas in the air became thicker and thicker, making one feel as if one was in the 9 levels of hell. But the next moment, suddenly a dragon's long roar was heard. From the black gas, bluish-green light flashed, abruptly burst out from the black gas. In a blink of an eye, the radiance was boundless, driving away the black gas. Lin Jingyu held the dragon-slaying celestial sword in his hand and appeared high up in the air. Azure light emitted from his body, extremely dazzling. His eyes were bright and piercing. Man and sword as one, suddenly pounced down from the sky. The dragon slayer sword carried thousands of rays of light, made a loud roar. Its imposing manner was unfathomable. Still far up in the air, but the ground was already filled with dust, sand and stones flying away, and following Lin Jingyu's body like lightning. The sides of his body also seemed to be ignited in flames because of his speed and ferocious momentum. He looked like a god of war, disregarding everything, full of fighting spirit, flying down. The Ancestral Hall old man's lips suddenly started to tremble. Boom! A loud rumbling sound could be heard in the blink of an eye. The ground that was hit by the mystical power of the true technique let out a painful groan. In an instant, the surface of the ground within the array was torn apart. Rocks of all sizes actually left the ground and shot up into the sky. And the dazzling bluish-green light ball in the middle of that power had already pierced deep into the ground. And the dazzling bluish-green light ball in the middle of that power had already pierced deep into the ground. The faint sound of a mysterious incantation could be heard in the air, and an invisible force spread out, enveloping this massive destructive force, preventing it from leaking out. Outside the spirit formation, the sun was warm and the grass and trees were leisurely growing. But inside the spirit formation, the sky and earth were turned upside down like a violent storm. This was the mystical scene outside Qing Yunhil, Founder's Masters. In the distance, a dark green figure was watching from afar. He stood motionlessly with his hands behind his back. The storm in the formation gradually calmed down. The sand and dust that had been blown into the sky by the huge force fell back down. The cracks on the ground and the huge, deep hole still recorded the earth-shattering blow just now. Standing at the entrance of the Founder's Ancestral Hall, the corners of the old man's mouth twitched, finally revealing a trace of a smile. In the depths of his eyes, there seemed to be a deep sense of gratification. After a whistling sound, Lin Jingyu leaped out of the deep pit with the Dragon Slayer sword in his hand. His body was covered with dust, and even his handsome face was stained with some dust. As soon as his body landed on the ground, he immediately started to pant heavily. However, His face was still filled with excitement. He raised his head and looked at the old man standing at the entrance of the ancestral hall. There was a hint of a smile on the corner of the old man's mouth. He slowly raised his hand and gently waved at him. Lin Jingyu caught his breath and walked quickly to the old man's side, calling out, "Senior, The old man smiled and nodded. His eyes were full of gratification and love as he looked at him. He said in a low voice, "You're good, really good." Speaking, he slowly raised his head and looked at the sky. He leisurely said, "Even if it was me at that time, mastering this slay ghost deity, true way sword formula, I was not much faster than you." Lin Jingyu, with a sound, sheathed the dragon slayer sword into its sheath. The excitement on his face had not faded. He said, "Senior, if not for your guidance, I really don't know when I would be able to master this kind of unique, true way." That old man snorted. His face revealed a trace of disdain. He faintly said, "Today in Qingyun's sect, other than Dao Xian, only Tian Bui and your previous teacher Vaskalo are still acceptable. The other elders are all good-for-nothings." Bei was startled. He had been learning from this mysterious old man in the ancestral hall for more than 10 years. Over the years, as his cultivation deepened, his respect and admiration for this old man deepened. He really felt that this old man had opened up a new world for him that he had never known before. It turned out that cultivation could also be done in this way. And as Lin Jingyu spent more time with this old man, the old man began to love him more and more. They talked more and more. Naturally, it involved some of the people in the world. At this moment, the old man's tone was unexpectedly arrogant. It was as if in the world, there were not many people who could enter his eyes. In the beginning, although Bei did not dare to refute, but in his heart he was not convinced. But as his cultivation deepened, he felt more and more that this old man was really unfathomable, felt even more that he was so arrogant. Naturally, he had his reasons. With his skills, how many people in the world would be able to catch his eye? But he always disliked that fat bamboo peak Shirshu Tian Bui. Perhaps it was because he saw Tian Bui scolding Sha Danan. He could not help but said, "Senior, I think that Tian Bui is very sloppy and ordinary. What's so great about him?" The old man glanced at him, shook his head and said, "What do you know? Tian Belize looks ordinary, but in cultivation, he has a special talent, and his character is persistent, far beyond ordinary people. This point is especially important after the cultivation deepens. When he entered the sect, he was always mediocre. Once he was enlightened, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. His achievement was even above those lively Shi Xiang and Shiji who looked down on him." He snorted coldly again, said, "In this world, 8 or 9 out of 10 people are mediocre. Like Tian Yun, Shang Zhengliang, a bunch of trash, what do they know?" Lin Jingyu was silent, but looking at the old man's arrogant expression, his words even belittled Taoist Tian Yun and the rest of the Qing Yun heads whose names shook the world back then as trash. If this was spread out, it would be a world-shocking joke, but for some reason, Lin Jingyu right now did not even have the slightest doubt. The old man turned his head and looked at Lin Jingyu, said, "Although you can use this style slay ghost deity, but this style of sword incantation is fierce and extreme yang. Although the power is great, it also consumes a lot of your body's energy. You are talented and can already practice this at such a young age, but you still need to continue practicing to be able to use it freely. Unless it is a critical moment, it is better not to use this sword incantation." Lin Jingyu knelt down in front of him, respectfully said, "Yes, disciple understands." The old man helped him up, assessed him with a few glances. A trace of arrogance flashed past his face, said, "In this world, Jadian people only know that celestial sword-wield thunder true formula is our Jadian supreme true way. Actually, what kind of person was our sect's Qingyi founder?" He sorted out the skills passed down by the predecessors, and also with his own understanding from the nameless ancient scroll, passed down a total of 4 styles of sword incantation. Which one of them is not a supreme true way with unparalleled power? "What?" Lin Jingyu was shocked, said, "There is such a thing, my teacher he. He had never told me before." The old man shook his head slightly, said, "Your teacher also does not know." Lin Jingyu's shock was no small matter. At that time, Taoist Song Song's status in Jadian sect was just below one person and above tens of thousands. But this old man actually said that even he did not know. But in fact, Taoist song indeed did not tell him. Towards this old man's identity and background, Lin Jingyu couldn't help but feel even more curious. That old man's eyes, which were filled with vicissitudes of life and experience, only needed to look at his face for a moment before he knew what this young man was thinking. However, he did not expose him. Instead, he suddenly frowned and seemed to have sensed something. His eyes suddenly looked into the distance. After a moment, he retracted his gaze, his expression a little strange, and then faintly said, "It is getting late. You go back first." Lin Jingyu was really reluctant, but he had always revered this old man like a deity and did not dare to disobey him. He respectfully knelt down and kowtowed 3 times before turning to leave. Not long after, only that old man was left. He was silent for a long time. His body resumed its stooped appearance, hobbled to one side. The broom danced, dust rose. At the same time as sweeping up the stones and dust, those mysterious talismans hidden in the secret places were also swept up by him, as if they were weightless, drifted into the dust. After tidying up that piece of empty land, he randomly filled those stones into the huge pit that Lin Jingyu had made, barely filling it up. This old man seemed to be panting and tired, stood and rested for a while before he slowly turned around and walked back into the founder's ancestral hall. In the ancestral hall, it was still as quiet and dim as usual. In the depths of the hall, before the innumerable memorial tablets, little by little flickering candles silently burned. Chapter 275. Just that at this moment, there was another figure standing in front of those memorial tablets, standing tall. That person in a dark green Taoist robe, with a sage-like demeanor, it was the current Qing Yun sect head, Reverend Daoxian. Reverend Daoxian heard the footsteps, turned and glanced at the old man, but did not say anything, and then turned to look at those memorial tablets, and then stepped forward, picked up 3 thin incense sticks from the sacrificial table in front of the tablets, lit them on the candles beside, respectfully held the incense sticks, bowed 3 times, inserted the incense sticks into the incense burner. "I have not come to offer incense for a period of time." Reverend Daoxian's voice was calm and slow, as if speaking to a very, very old friend. "Don't know if the ancestors will blame me." The old man standing behind him walked up shakily, leaned the broom aside, picked up a rag, gently wiped the ashes on the sacrificial table, quietly said, "You have made our Qing Yun sect so lively, the ancestors can't wait to be happy. Why would they blame you?" Reverend Daoxian smiled faintly, turned to look at him, suddenly said, "You seem to have aged a few more years." The old man paused for a moment and then continued to wipe the table. Without turning his head, said, "Even the heart is dead. Naturally will age faster." Reverend Daoxian silently looked at the old man, did not speak again. The old man slowly and carefully finished wiping the sacrificial table, placed the rag aside, turned to face Reverend Daoxian, looked at him for a while, suddenly said, "You have seen it all, just now?" Reverend Daoxian silently nodded, sighed, and said, "That child's aptitude is indeed very high, but," his voice seemed to be a little louder, "I did not expect you would pass slay ghost deity to him." That old man snorted, said, "This child's temperament and aptitude are all good. Since it is so, why not pass it on? Don't tell me like you. Hide it in your body and bring it to the coffin after death." Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed, as if angry, but for some reason, facing this old man, he is the world's revered leader of the good faction. Even such sarcastic words, his countenance only changed for a moment, and then he held it in. "All right, there's one more thing I need to tell you," Reverend Daoxian indifferently said. The old man raised his head and said, "I'm just an old man with 1 foot in the grave. What's the matter?" Reverend Daoxian said, "It will be today, later on. Funxiang Valley Master Yun Elon will lead his disciples and come to Qing Yun Hill for a visit." The old man suddenly frowned and said, "Yun Elon?" Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "You still remember him?" The old man sneered and turned his head. His voice suddenly became somewhat meaningful as he said, "That person is a crafty old fox, southern border, 7-mile, cave mountain range." This was an undulating mountain range, with the 7-mile cave as the center extending in all directions. These mountains had always been a place with lush forests and green hills and clear waters, but now they had completely lost their original appearance. An icy cold wind descended from the sky, whistling through the mountains like the cries of ghosts. The sky was filled with black clouds, pressing very low, a little like when the Lee tribe invaded the 7-Mile Cave, but the power was far from that day. And in the forest, which was originally filled with various kinds of birds and beasts, right now it had completely turned into hell on earth. All kinds of strange beasts were everywhere. The corpses of birds and beasts were massacred, a stench of blood. Following a long howl, a clear figure flew over from afar. In a few leaps it was before them. It was Qinglong. His face was grim, his clothes already stained with blood. A strong wind brushed past. He stopped on a horizontal branch, looked around anxiously, and then looked behind him. Between the originally peaceful forest trees, suddenly an ear-piercing long howl was heard. Where it flapped its wings loudly, that enormous white-boned snake suddenly soared into the sky. Its two huge eyes immediately reflected Qinglong's figure. With a loud roar, pounced over. And immediately behind it, black smoke billowed, waves of roars like waves. Innumerable demonic beasts swarmed over, pouncing towards Qinglong. Not long ago, the 7-Mile Cave Meow people's residential area was suddenly surrounded by innumerable demonic beasts. Leading them was this extremely terrifying demonic white-boned snake. This white-boned snake's body was huge. Wherever it passed by, white bones danced, humans and beasts were thrown out, and it could even spit out poisonous gas. Those who were hit would die immediately. As for the other ordinary demonic beasts, they were also extremely powerful and extremely cruel. Although the Meow people were brave, but how would they be these demonic beasts' match? In a blink, the 7-Mile Cave became hell on earth, a slaughterhouse. Qinglong saw that the situation was not good, made a prompt decision. Let the Meow tribe leader Tu Magu to withdraw the remaining Meow people into the altar. Those shamans in the altar still knew some southern border shaman skills and could resist for a while, and he dashed forward, caught the white-boned snake unawares, at the same time using his swift movements to deal heavy blows, killing and injuring the demonic beasts. As expected, he attracted most of the demonic beasts' attention to himself. Just that other demonic beasts were still all right, but that white-boned snake was not to be underestimated. With Qinglong's level of skills, in addition to his rare treasure ring of universe-clear light, he actually could not win. And the surrounding demonic beasts gathered more and more. Qinglong's pressure also increased. While he was shocked, he also had the intention to lure these demonic beasts away. So he fled up the mountain. As expected, many demonic beasts, including the white-boned snake, were lured over. Just that since he wanted to lure the demonic beasts away, he was unwilling to fly up and only skimmed over the forest ground, but unexpectedly, it seemed that the wild beasts and birds all over the mountain had undergone a strange transformation. Either they were killed, or they turned into extremely aggressive demonic beasts. Wherever they went, they would appear and would be attacked. It was really difficult to deal with. At this moment, the Azure Dragon once again flew up, dodging the enraged, white-boned demon snake's huge tail strike, but saw 3 or 4 huge trees that had lived for who knows how many years were swept aside by this demon beast, as if they were dry weeds and rotten wood, making a clattering noise. Along the way, it directly smashed into many of the smaller demonic beasts, causing wails to ring out in all directions. The white-boned snake saw Qinglong flying up. Its snake head looked up to the sky. With a furious roar, suddenly its 3 pairs of wings flapped. Its huge body actually flew up, pouncing towards Qinglong in the air. Qinglong was shocked, although he saw from the start that this demonic beast had 3 pairs of wings. But when such a huge body really flew up, the power was really shocking. For a moment, that huge body blotted out the sky and covered the earth as it pounced down. But Qinglong was, after all, not an ordinary human. He was ranked first among the 4 holy envoys of Ghost King's sect. Naturally, he had his outstanding points. His body twisted and forcefully passed through the gaps of the white-boned snake's body, flying in the opposite direction of the 7-Mile Cave. The white-boned snake hissed again and again, flapped its wings and pursued. Qinglong flew for a while. His skills were after all profound. Gradually he left the snake and the other demonic beast far behind. Looking at the distance, he was thinking if he should shake off these monsters and return to the 7-mile cave to see how the Meow people were doing. Just at this moment, he suddenly glanced out of the corner of his eyes, saw a purple light flash past in the forest below him, and then blood-splattered. Demonic beast roars rose and fell. Immediately, the demonic beast from all directions rushed towards the place below him. Looking from the sky, numerous ferocious demonic beasts bare their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced over. Like an endless evil sea surging and surging, it was really hair-raising. And among them, a woman's angry shout was mixed in. Qinglong's heart was moved. A few thoughts flashed past his mind like lightning. Eventually, he still turned back and went forward to investigate. Upon entering the forest, he could only smell the stench of blood. Everywhere were demonic beast corpses, lying on the ground in pieces, blood splattered everywhere. Not far away, there was indeed a person who looked like a woman fighting with innumerable demonic beasts. In her hand was a shining purple magical weapon, its sharp edge swallowing and spitting. One look, and one could tell it was not an ordinary item. Qinglong's eyes shrunk, hoarsely said, "Purple light blade. You are Jean Pinger?" That woman seemed to be shocked too, turned back and looked. Her body floated over, but her hands did not stop. With a purple light flashed, another 3 demonic beasts were killed. "Who are you?" Jean Pinger landed beside Qinglong, coldly asked. Qinglong felt puzzled. With Jean Pinger's current cultivation, why did she not fly up once she reached the sky? Only a few of these demonic beasts could fly up. Wouldn't that be simple? Although he thought so, but Qinglong was still prepared to answer. Just that before he could speak, both him and Jean Pinger's bodies shook at the same time. As if sensing something, they looked up together. Just a moment ago, the innumerable demonic beasts were still in a frenzied state. Suddenly, like the tide retreated, but deep in the forest ahead of them, a gush of cold, murderous intent surged over. This formless, murderous intent was so cold that even these 2 highly skilled figures could not help but shivered. Qinglong was aghast. In the southern border, there was actually such a terrible thing. Just when they were shocked, the next moment, behind a huge tree ahead, a figure suddenly flashed. A person slowly walked out. That person was dressed in bright-colored silk clothes, a head of black hair scattered over his shoulders, both hands slender and white. His looks even more handsome. He was actually a pretty to the point of almost seductive youth. Azure Dragon was dumbfounded, but almost at the same time, he suddenly felt that Jean Pinger's body, for some reason, was trembling slightly after the appearance of this young man. Chapter 276. The forest gradually quieted down. The ferocious demonic beasts a moment ago, for some reason, had dispersed far away. The speed was so fast that Qinglong was taken aback. Just that in his heart, Jean Pinger's reaction when she saw this strange young man was even more unfathomable to him. The young man's eyes slowly landed on both of them, carefully assessed them, seemed to frown slightly, said, "Both of you are Central Plains people, right?" This young man spoke in a gentle and pleasant and very pure Central Plains language. Qinglong was startled for a moment, asked in reply, "Who are you?" The young man smiled faintly, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. He looked a little naive, completely out of place in the bloody scene around him. He smiled and said, "Who am I?" "This question is a good one," he slowly said. "Who am I?" Qinglong snorted, suppressed his voice, and said, "I am Ghost King Sect Qinglong." "Who is this person?" Jean Pinger was shocked. Obviously, she also knew of Qinglong's name. The evil sect's 3 big branches had always been fighting fiercely. Jean Pinger as He-Huan sect's new generation outstanding disciple. Although she had never seen Qinglong, but the information of this important figure in Ghost King sect was already very familiar to her. She nodded slightly, considered as a greeting. Originally, from their standpoint, they should be enemies and not friends. Just that right now, in this southern border foreign land, demonic beasts rampaging, both of them could not help but treat each other as comrades in arms. Jean Pinger glanced at that young man, quietly said, "Be careful. He is the demon beast. All of the surrounding demonic beasts are his subordinates. His skills are very high." She paused and softly added, "His skills are also very strange." Qinglong frowned, was about to ask a few more questions when suddenly a roar was heard from behind, following which sounds of trees falling were heard incessantly. Both of them quickly turned to look, saw that white-boned snake demon charging straight over. Just that there were no other small demons beside it. Most likely they were the same as the other demonic beasts, intimidated by the demon beast appearance, and dared not come near. Azure Dragon did not expect the white-boned snake demon to catch up so quickly. Seeing that the snake demon was in front of him in the blink of an eye, accompanied by a gust of wind, a white shadow flashed, and the huge body of the snake demon swept over. The large trees that had grown for many years were swept away like grass in front of these monsters. They were uprooted and flew toward them with loud booms. Qing Long and Jean Pinger leapt up at the same time. Both of them were not ordinary people. With one look they could tell that this white-boned demon snake was not an ordinary demon. It was filled with evil energy. Clearly its skills were not low. But more importantly, the mysterious youth in front of them hadn't made a move since the beginning, and the two of them couldn't see through him no matter how hard they tried. Forget about Qing Long. He was only secretly fearful. But that Jean Pinger seemed to know more than Qing Long. She was extremely nervous, even when she was facing the white-boned snake demon. Half of her thoughts were still on her back. Jean Pinger's state naturally could not escape the experienced Qing Long's eyes. At this moment, the two of them did not engage in direct combat with the white-boned demon snake. Instead, they relied on their agility to chase and fly around the white-boned demon snake. Occasionally, they would take the opportunity to attack the white-boned demon snake. However, the body of the demon snake seemed to be extremely tough. Ordinary magical treasures and Dao techniques could not harm it. And unable to catch up with Qing Long and Jean Pinger, that white-boned snake demon roared again and again. Its huge body kept twisting and turning. Its speed also became faster and faster, without the slightest bit of clumsiness, gradually catching up with the two of them. Qing Long was shocked. This white-boned snake demon was already so difficult to deal with. The youth behind them, whom Jean Pinger called the demon beast, was the leader of these monsters. Wouldn't it be even more terrifying? With this thought, he had the intention to leave. While flying past Jean Pinger, he urgently said, "Quickly go." Jean Pinger obviously did not want to stay here for long, immediately nodded, and at the same time pointed to the sky. Qing Long understood. Almost at the same time, both of them gave a light shout. A clear light from Qing Long's hand mixed with Jean Pinger's purple light hit the white-boned snake demon's spine from the side. Even though the white-boned snake demon's bones were tough and thick, it was also hit backwards by these two experts. The snake's body was soft. After a few shakes, the force dissipated, but in the end it was already suppressed and unable to pursue. Qing Long took advantage of this gap. With a light whistle, soared up, but the moment his body flew up, he suddenly had a thought, glanced to the side from the corner of his eyes, and indeed did not see Jean Pinger flying up. Just as Azure Dragon was feeling bewildered, the originally clear sky in front of him suddenly darkened. A black curtain suddenly appeared above the branch he had just flown out of, and a force that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas came crashing down. At that critical moment, the Azure Dragon was on guard. The ring of universe clear light on his right hand shone brightly, instantly forming a ball of light that protected his entire body. At the same time, his body forcefully moved to the side. But even so, that patch of darkness pounced down at an unimaginable speed, a loud sound. Qing Long's protective halo was still hit by the great force and immediately flew out. And at the same time, Qing Long clearly saw Jean Pinger turned into a purple light, flew up to the sky from behind that patch of darkness. From afar, he could still hear her gentle laughter. "Thank you, uncle. In future, if we are fated, I will thank you in person." Qing Long suppressed the surging blood in his chest, a bitter smile on his lips. He had been unhindered all his life, and in his old age, he was actually schemed against by a young lady. Just that at this moment, how could he care about Jean Pinger? He stretched out his hand and grabbed onto a big tree trunk. A sound, his palms sank deeply into the wood. His body then made a turn and landed. In the next moment, the white-boned snake demon had already caught up with him, like a tiger eyeing its prey, but it did not immediately rush up. A huge snake head flicked its tongue, hissing. As for that patch of darkness, it landed on the ground. a sound, and disappeared. The speed was so fast it was really rare. And that seductive young man, like a ghost, appeared one zhang away from Qing Long, his hands clasped behind his back. Qing Long landed on the ground, heaved a long sigh. He was intercepted, but right now he was not in a hurry to escape. Only frowning slightly, glanced at that young man, suddenly said, "That evil thing in the sky, just now, is it the legendary Tai?" That young man raised his eyebrows, revealed a smile on his lips, nodded and said, "Did not expect you to have some foresight. That's right, it is Tao Tai." Hoa! Following the young man's words, this time the strange sound was soft and deep, coming from behind the young man. The next moment, an extremely hideous, strange head slowly peeked out from behind the young man's figure. It was hard to tell what kind of animal this strange head was, but it had 4 eyes that were as thick as a copper bell, and 2 pairs of them were on either side of its face. 6 sharp fangs were exposed from its big mouth, and saliva was constantly dripping from its mouth. On its grayish-black skin, there were lumps of thick, hard lumps. Even the most ferocious ghost in the mortal world's legends most likely would not be as hideous as this strange beast. Qing Long inhaled a breath of cold air. The Tao Tai's neck seemed to be extremely long. That strange head stretched out a lot from behind the young man, turned around, and actually wound around to the young man's shoulder, and that young man in front of such a ferocious strange beast, his expression was calm and composed. Qing Long composed himself, slowly said, "Did not expect that in this world there is still such a ferocious beast existing." That young man smiled, stretched out his hand, and actually stroked the Tao Tai's head. That Tao Tai looked extremely ferocious, but under the young man's palm, it only growled softly and even used its head to rub against the young man's hand. If not for its ferocious appearance, it would almost look like a little puppy. That young man glanced at Qing Long, suddenly said, "That lady just now is your companion." She knew that the Tao Tai was hiding in the air, but deliberately made you the bait. After luring the Tao Tai down, she escaped by herself. Right now, you must be very angry in your heart. Qing Long was secretly on his guard, but his mouth still smiled and said, "Being tricked by her, it is my own incompetence. Cannot blame others." That young man took another look at him, nodded and said, "Since it is so, then you shall die." His voice had yet to fade, and he did not seem to make any movement, but the white-boned snake, which had been eyeing Qing Long like a tiger behind him, suddenly, as if it had received an order, opened its huge mouth and bit down. Qing Long had been on high alert, although the white-boned snake suddenly attacked, but he did not panic. Instead of retreating, he advanced and directly charged towards the snake, giving that snake a fright. Taking advantage of the moment when the snake was stunned, Qing Long had already dashed below the snake. His body flashed and avoided the venomous gas that the enraged snake spat out. His feet kicked the snake's white bones, forcefully kicking the snake's huge body forward by 3 chi and at the same time borrowing the force. He soared up, and a clear light lit up in his hands, instantly laying 6 light walls in the direction of the Tao Tai. Among the 2 beasts and 1 human, the one he feared the most was still that young man who had not made a move yet. The white-boned snake roared again and again, but it was already too late. Qing Long was about to fly up to the sky and escape from the trap. Suddenly his legs tightened. His body, which was soaring up, was caught by a hand. The next moment, a low, deep laughter was heard from below. A great force came from that hand. Qing Long only felt as if his body was on fire. His body shook violently. His body was involuntarily flung out by that hand. In the midair, his body was seen drifting, accompanied by the sound of branches breaking and snapping. Qing Long's body was once again flung into the forest. In the forest, once again the roars of innumerable evil beasts were heard. In the midair, that young man closed his eyes slightly, looked up at the sky. A breeze blew past, blowing his brightly colored silk clothes, fluttering in the wind. In the distance, there seemed to be ferocious beasts roaring, too. Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tian Peak, Crystal Hall. Qing Yun Sect from Sect Head, Reverend Daoxian down. Each branch leaders gather in the hall, and there were also many elders standing behind the leaders, a rare sight standing at the entrance of Crystal Hall. Looking at them, It seemed like they were waiting for someone, no matter who it was, to be able to receive such courtesy from Qing Yun's sect. It was already the world's #1 figure. Other than the Qing Yun sect people, Li Sun also stood below, quietly and respectfully, just that his eyes indistinctly revealed an agitated expression, his gaze occasionally glancing to the other side. There, Anan, dressed in white, was standing behind Shuiwa Master with an indifferent expression. Not long after, a melodious bell sound was heard from the distant Qing Yun Hill, rang 5 times in succession. Everyone present looked towards the outside of the hall. From afar, a voice was heard. Funxiang Valley Master, Yun Elon, Mr. Yun paying a visit. Almost at the same time, a flame-like figure appeared at the entrance of Crystal Hall. Hee, where is Daoxian's senior brother? Junior brother misses you to death. Chapter 277. Dressed in red, full of smiles, Yun Elon strode in. Behind him followed Changwan, Solution, and a group of Funxiang Valley elders and disciples. Looking at the number of people, there were more than 10 of them. The Qing Yun sect people made a slight sound of bewilderment, but the next moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Yun Elon's face. This renowned figure of the world's good faction for many years was also an all-powerful character. Most of the older Qing Yun sect elders present had seen this person before, but right now, in everyone's eyes, there was only astonishment. This man who looked vaguely similar, but was clearly only in his prime, was he really that Yun Elon whose hair and beard had already turned white decades ago? Reverend Daoxian carefully assessed Yun Elon, walked forward, smiled, and said, Yun patron, you and I have not met for many years. Unexpectedly, your skills have improved greatly. You have already comprehended Jade Sun Realm from Funxiang Jade Book, a pioneer in Funxiang Valley for 800 years. Congratulations. Yun Elon's smiling face suddenly stiffened. A trace of surprise flashed past his eyes, but his expression had already returned to normal. Said, Daoxian's senior brother really has good eyesight. Respect, respect. Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, Not at all. Not at all. It should be me who admire you. Yun Elon looked at him. Reverend Daoxian smiled and looked at each other. The next moment, both of them looked at each other and laughed. Li Sun walked up, knelt down and bowed, said, Teacher, disciple has been waiting here for a long time. Yun Elon nodded, smiled, and said, Get up. You have been here for a few days. Have you comprehended the wonders of Qing Yun Hill, this paradise on earth? Li Sun stood up respectfully, said, Qing Yun Hill really lives up to its reputation. Disciple has really broadened my horizons. And also I have to thank Daoxian teacher uncle, and he paused, loudly said, and Small Bamboo Valley, Lu Sweki Lu Jr. sister, for bringing me to experience this paradise. The Qing Yun sect crowd immediately. Buzz sound, discussion started. Other than the elders, there were also many younger generation disciples. Numerous gazes immediately looked towards that cold lady. The corners of Lu Sweki's mouth twitched, but his expression remained indifferent. In the end, he did not say anything. Reverend Daoxian smiled, pulled Yun Elon's hand, and said, Yun Valley Master has such a good disciple. You have a successor. Come, please take a seat. Yun Elon bowed and said, Sage, please. Both of them looked at each other and smiled, walked up together. Reverend Daoxian and Yun Elon sat together at the main seat. On both sides were their own sect members. After a round of pleasantries, Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, Funxiang Valley is the world's great good faction. Everyone in the world respects us. Yun Valley Master actually graces us with your presence. It really brings light to Qing Yun sect. Yun Elon shook his head repeatedly, said, Reverend is too kind, too kind. While speaking, his expression suddenly turned serious. Solemnly said, Actually, this time I am here to pay a visit. There are 2 important matters that I would like to request from Qing Yun sect. Reverend Daoxian hurriedly said, Valley Master Yun is too courteous. Please speak your mind. Yun Elon coughed once, said, To be honest, this first matter is related to a great calamity rarely seen in these few hundred years. The Qing Yun sect people were immediately moved. Tian Bui, who was sitting below Reverend Daoxian, frowned, said, Yun Valley Master, what do you mean? Yun Elon sighed, said, Everyone may not know. Just a month ago, in the southern border, 10,000 great mountains that our valley has guarded for generations, a peerless evil demon has been revived. Reverend Daoxian was stunned, said, "Peerless evil demon?" Yun Elon nodded and said, "That's right, it is a peerless evil demon. Everyone is far away in Central Plains and do not know the details. But our Funxiang Valley has guarded the southern border for generations, so we know the details. This evil demon calls himself Beast Deity, an ancient evildoer. We do not know where he came from, only know that back then he brought disaster to the world, massacred countless lives." Sitting beside Tian Bui, Peak of the Wind head Zheng Shuchong frowned and said, "Don't tell me that with Yun Valley Master's exceptional skills, plus Fun Xiang Valley's entire strength, we still cannot deal with this evil demon." Yin Elon's face dimmed, said, "Everyone must be joking. It is not that our valley is afraid of trouble. Do not dare to take up the responsibility. It is really because I know this is no small matter, not something Fun Xiang Valley alone can handle. Therefore I took the liberty to come here, plead reverend for the sake of the common people, to call out, let the world fight together. Only then will there be hope of victory. Or else the great matter will fail. The world's living beings will suffer countless casualties." The Qing Yun sect people looked at each other. It was true. Everything was going well. Fun Xiang Valley suddenly jumped out and said there was a peerless evil demon, forcing all the cultivators in the world to fight together for there to be hope. How could they accept it? But Reverend Daoxian was after all an enlightened cultivator. After pondering for a long time, he resolutely said, "If the matter is really as Yun Valley Master said, it will be an unprecedented calamity for the common people. We as cultivators have always prided ourselves on the righteous way. We definitely cannot ignore it. Since it is so, our Qing Yun sect will join hands with Funxiang Valley to fight against this evil demon. Later I will send another letter to Tianyin Temple Puhong Master. Invite him to come to Qing Yun Hill for a discussion." Yin Elon heaved a long sigh, clapped his hands, and said, "This is very good. Little brother can then be at ease." Reverend Daoxian smiled and said, "Yin Valley Master must be joking. All right, I wonder what is the second important matter. Could it be another calamity?" Yin Elon's eyes flashed, looked deeply at Reverend Daoxian, and said, "Not so. This second matter is a good thing." Reverend Daoxian's lips revealed a trace of smile. Yin Elon smiled and said, "The second matter that I am here for is for disciple Li Sun to propose to your honorable sect, Lu Sweki Miss Lu." Once the words were spoken, Lu Sweki, who was standing behind Shuiwa Master, was startled, abruptly raised her head, and Qing Yun's sect immediately like a boiling pot. An uproar. This reaction was even more shocking than when they heard there was a peerless evil demon calamity. Innumerable eyes instantly looked at Lu Sweki's stunned face. The next moment were attracted by Reverend Daoxian. Qing Yun's sect head, Reverend Daoxian, pondered for a moment, loudly said, "I have seen Li Sun, this child, for the past few days. He is indeed a dragon among men. His future is limitless." Yin Elon smiled and said, "Reverend is flattering me, but I do indeed intend to pass the Valley Master position to this good-for-nothing disciple, and with the great enemy before us, we have such a joyous matter. It shows our sincere cooperation. At the same time, it also raises the morale of the world's heroes. What does Reverend think?" Tian Bui, who was sitting beside, had a face of disdain, almost snorted out. Luckily his wife Suru was quick, pulled him back. Reverend Daoxian's eyes shifted, swept past the Qing Yun sect people, and finally landed on Lu Sweki. Lu Sweki frowned tightly, her lips trembling slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but considering the occasion, she did not say it out loud. Reverend Daoxian smiled, turned to Yun Elon and said, "Yun Valley Master's good intention is really unexpected." Yin Elon cupped his fists, smiled, and said, "My disciple and I are completely sincere. Hope Reverend will grant our wish." Reverend Daoxian stretched his hand to his chest, stroked his long beard, slowly said, "Natural evil. Calamity is imminent. We need both our sects to work together. Only then can we save the common people. And this marriage, a perfect match, I am also very fond of it. There was another uproar in Qing Yun's sect. No one expected. Reverend Daoxian actually agreed to this marriage. Reverend Daoxian then turned to Shueiyue master sitting beside, smiled and said, Shueiyue junior sister, Sueki is your disciple. It should be up to you to decide. Lu Sueki's face was pale, obviously shaken by this matter. When she heard Reverend Daoxian's words, she could not help but step forward, called out to Shueiyue master. Teacher, Shueiyue master slowly raised her eyes. Her eyes turned to Lu Sueki's peerless face, as if trying to see something from that face. The expression in her eyes complicated. After a long silence, slowly said, This marriage, I also agree very much. Master Li is a dragon among men, a good match. Crystal Hall, suddenly quietened down, including Tian Bui and the rest, all looked at Shueiyue master in disbelief. Lu Sueki's body suddenly swayed, and Li Sun at a distance, right now, was already beaming with joy. Ha 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 ha. Yin Elon's laughter broke the silence. Great, great, since both elders have agreed on this matter, Sueki why aren't you going up quickly to thank both of them? Li Sun hurriedly ran up, knelt down, and kowtowed. Yin Elon smiled and said, Today's words will definitely be passed down through the ages, praised by the world. Wait. Suddenly, a light shout, in this great hall, in this world's good faction, giant Yin Elon's voice, coldly sounded, interrupted Yin Elon's words. The entire hall's countenance changed. Lu Sueki, dressed in white like snow, her face pale, one hand tightly holding Tianya's scabbard, slowly walked out. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed slightly, looked at Shueiyue master. Shueiyue master only looked at Lu Sueki's figure, suddenly quietly sighed, closed her eyes, looking like she was not going to bother anymore. Reverend Daoxian's countenance changed again. His face slowly darkened, slowly stood up, said, Sueki, do you have anything to say? In Crystal Hall, it was silent. Everyone's eyes were looking at that white-attired lady. Her clothes gently fluttered even though there was no wind. Looking from afar, even her figure indistinctly looked like duckweed, swaying indeterminately, frail and weathered by the wind and rain. Just that her lips were pursed so tightly. Her pale cheeks indistinctly had a strange flush. That pair of shoulders that started to tremble, for the first time, made people feel helpless. Suddenly, she abruptly turned around, her back facing everyone in this crystal hall, facing outside that tall and majestic hall door, towards that boundless blue sky, towards the distance beyond the blue sky, towards a distant unknown place, gazing deeply. What kind of emotion was that glance? In Crystal Hall, her deep but resolute, ice-breaking and snow-slicing voice was heard. I am not willing. Far away, on the unfamiliar hilltop, the figure crawling in the dark corner suddenly trembled. The sounds of insects that had been rising and falling in the mountains were suddenly cut off. That figure slowly struggled, stood up in the shadows, as if sensing something, stared blankly into the distance. A monkey figure jumped out from his side, scurried up to his shoulder. After a long time, his voice was heard from the darkness. Xiao Hui, why is my heart suddenly beating so fast? Chapter 278. The calamity started in that year's spring and summer. Thousands of years later, the people of the world still remembered clearly that period of terrifying and crazy days. In the extreme south of the southern border, in the 10,000 great mountains, suddenly innumerable strange beasts swarmed out, their numbers uncountable, all of them bloodthirsty by nature, regardless of gender or age, killed anyone they saw. There were even more ferocious beasts who were greedy for human flesh, wherever they passed. It was a tragic sight. This calamity broke out in the southern border region near the 10,000 great mountains, swiftly spread to the entire southern border. The southern border 5 tribes Miao, Zhuang, Tu, Li, Gaoshan rose up to resist. However, when faced with countless monsters and non-humankind beings, especially among the countless ferocious monsters and non-humankind beings, there were more than 10 strange monsters that possessed especially powerful demonic powers and magics. The resistance of the 5 clans was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In the blink of an eye, the 5 clans were defeated, and the southern region was plunged into an abyss of misery and suffering. This matter immediately shook the world and spread throughout the world. The common people of the Central Plains were terrified every day and were in a constant state of anxiety. Some of the common people of the Central Plains near the southern border dragged their families and fled to the north, hoping to be as far away from this calamity as possible. The cultivators of the world were all shocked. Even the good and evil sects who had always been fighting openly and covertly stopped temporarily, secretly watching the movements in the south, and started to plan their own countermeasures. The Southern Good faction big sect Funxiang Valley, because the Valley Master Yun Elon happened to be leading most of the disciples to Qing Yun Hill to visit Reverend Dao Xian, luckily escaped the calamity. It was rumored that after the incident, Yun Elon Valley Master, who was at Qing Yun Hill, heard of the tragic state of the southern border commoners, pounded his chest and stamped his feet in anguish, said that if he was around, he would never allow the evildoer to harm the commoners. His words were filled with sorrow and self-reproach. He already had the intention to commit suicide to apologize to the world. Luckily, his left and right disciples held him back, and with Qing Yun's sect elders persuading him with kind words, Yun Valley Master then calmed down, vowed to use the entire Funxiang Valley strength to avenge the southern border commoners. Not long after, Yun Elon announced to the cultivators of the world at Qing Yun Hill, explained that today's calamity was caused by a demonic beast. This demonic beast was powerful, savage in nature. Unless the world joined forces, it could not be stopped. In view of this, Funxiang Valley and Qing Yun's sect together called out to the cultivators of the world to use the world's strength to exterminate this evil. The next day, Tian'in Temple, who received the news, made an official response, agreed to Qing Yun, burning incense's call. In a few days, they would send someone over for the alliance meeting. The righteous faction anxiously gathered and discussed, and sent several batches of outstanding disciples to the south to investigate the background of these strange beasts. After all, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. And the usually arrogant evil sect, 3 big branches Ghost King sect, Wandu clan, and Hehuan sect instead quietened down, seemed to be observing each other and not in a hurry to take any action. It was in this situation where a storm was brewing that the Central Plains temporarily fell into a strange tranquility. This strange peace was finally broken the day before the arrival of the summer solstice. The strange beasts that had ravaged the southern border beyond recognition finally killed their way into the Central Plains. But in the beginning, there were not many casualties among the common people, because as early as a month ago, the common people near the south had already fled. Just that the number of the strange beasts seemed to be increasing and also spread out even faster, looking like they were about to force their way into the Central Plains hinterland. At that time, it would be the time for the common people to descend into misery. It was hard to tell whether it was shocking news or a rumor that was hard to distinguish between truth and falsehood, but shocking news indeed came one after another. Yesterday, it was said that a village had been massacred, and today, it was said that an entire city had been turned into ruins. Everyone lived every day in fear and terror. All were so unbearable and panicky. Just that, to those who had lost all hope, even if everyone in the world died, it seemed to have nothing to do with them. Ghostly, Zhou Yixian, Xiao Huan, and Wild Dog had been together for more than a month. Even he himself did not know why he kept following them. Maybe he had long felt that there was no place for him to go and just let nature take its course. In the group, Zhou Yixian was the one who was most opposed to having Ghostly with him. Not to mention having an additional fellow to eat for free, he did not know how to carry luggage or do odd jobs like Wild Dog Taoist. All day if he was not drinking then sleeping. Instead, he often needed someone to take care of him. And to talk about eating for free, Ghostly only drank a little wine. Zhou Yixian's biggest thorn in his side was instead that 3-eyed monkey. Xiao Hui not only had an astonishing appetite, his alcohol tolerance was also far from Ghostly, who would get drunk the moment he drank a big bag of strong wine. The monkey's face did not even turn red. His face did not even blush. If not for Tawny's insistence to bring this man and monkey along, Zhou Yixian would have run as far as he could. As for Wild Dog Taoist, ever since that night when he suddenly had the murderous intent to plot against Ghostly, but was discovered and stopped by Xiao Hui, in the end he was instead spared by Ghostly. From then on, Wild Dog Taoist became even more taciturn, often did not speak a word for several days. But these few days, no matter if it was the nagging Zhou Yixian or Xiao Huan, including the silent wild dog Taoist, they all gradually discovered that Ghostly seemed to have some changes, although it was difficult for them to say it clearly. But Ghostly was indeed gradually waking up. The most obvious sign was that his drunkenness started to lessen. Sometimes he did not drink for the whole night, but his behavior was still very strange. Ghostly often sat together with Xiao Hui, facing the north direction, in a daze, as if thinking about something. The news of the calamity in the south, following the citizens fleeing to the north, gradually spread. Zhou Yixian and the rest also knew about it. Among them, Zhou Yixian was first stunned after hearing the news, and then after pondering for a long time, shook his head and then sighed all day, said where should they escape to? As for the others, they were not as worried as him. Ghostly and Wild Dog Taoist looked preoccupied. Xiao Huan did not seem to care about that distant danger. To her, playing with Xiao Hui, occasionally taking care of Ghostly and chatting with him. The days were also very enjoyable. But under Zhou Yixian's insistence, they eventually headed north. According to Zhou Yixian, the further they were from the south, at least their lives would be easier. But following the increasing number of refugees from the south, the situation in the news also seemed to be worsening. The monsters from the 10,000 Great Mountains were like hot knife cutting through butter, devouring their way, and had gradually forced their way into Central Plains hinterland. A few days ago, among the many news, there was even one that said the monsters had already killed their way to a city several hundred miles behind them, scaring Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan and the rest into hurrying on their way. Although they soon found out that the news was just a rumor, but the fear in the hearts of the people, it could be seen. Deep into the night, the group of them camped in the wilderness, built a fire on a small hill, and sat around the fire. Only Ghostly sat at a distance. Xiao Hui jumped out from the darkness, carrying a number of wild fruits in its hands, not knowing where it picked them from. With 2 or 3 leaps, jumped on a Ghostly's shoulder, sat down, and started eating. Zhou Yixian glanced over, after a moment, looked at Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, said, I have something I want to tell all of you. Xiao Huan felt puzzled, glanced at Zhou Yixian and said, Grandfather, what is it? Zhou Yixian was about to speak. Suddenly Xiao Hui, who was sitting on Ghostly's shoulder, seemed to have discovered something, loudly called out. Everyone was shocked, not knowing what was going on. One by one stood up, walked behind Xiao Hui, and looked at the direction where its limbs were dancing. Under the dim light, on the ancient path at the foot of the hill, a group of people walked over. There were men, women, old and young. All of them looked exhausted, but they still staggered forward. Zhou Yixian watched for a long while, sighed, and said, They're the refugees from the south. Everyone was silent. No one spoke. Zhou Yixian was silent for a moment, said, Actually, what I wanted to say is this. Right now, we do not know what is going on in the south, but suddenly many monsters appeared and killed people on sight. This can't be wrong. These few days, we have seen many people fleeing toward the north. I think we have to speed up our journey and run towards the north. Xiao Huan frowned, said, Grandfather, heading north is right. Anyway, we have always been wandering around, but the north is so big. I heard those monsters move especially fast. Do you have a good place to hide? Zhou Yixian glared at her, said, Didn't you hear the rumors these few days? Those monsters have some abilities. Some have sharp noses. Some have good hearing. No matter if you hide in the trees, in the cellars, or even deep in the mountains, you will be found and eaten. Encountering this kind of goddamn monsters, where can I find a place to hide? Xiao Huan's face turned bitter, said, Then what do we do? Are we going to be eaten by those monsters sooner or later? Zhou Yixian snorted, said, Nonsense, Zhou Great Celestial has divine foresight. How can I die in the mouths of these beasts? I have already calculated. Right now, in the whole world, there's only one place that is the safest. Xiao Huan was surprised. Wild Dog Taoist, and even Ghostly's body moved. Looked towards Zhou Yixian. Zhou Yixian unconsciously became complacent, laughed twice. Xiao Huan was surprised and happy, said, Grandfather, there is actually such a place. Quickly say it. Zhou Yixian coughed twice, then solemnly said, Qing Yun Hill. Wild Dog Tao's countenance changed. Ghostly turned his head away. Only Xiao Huan was surprised, said, I know Qing Yun Hill is where Qing Yun's sect is. There are many cultivators, but after all, it is only a faction strength. Encountering those strange beasts and tribes, it is already good enough to protect themselves. How would they have the time to care about us? Zhou Yixian laughed, said, This you don't know, although there is no news yet, but I am sure Funxiang Valley and Tianyin Temple sects will definitely be at Qing Yun meeting, because Yun Elon, that old fellow, is at Qing Yun right now. In addition to the Battle of Qing Yun 10 years ago, Qing Yun sect's Zhu Xian sword formation. Ghostly heard these words. His body shook violently. But Zhou Yixian did not notice him, continued excitedly, said, Qing Yun sect's Zhu Xian sword formation is in the limelight. Everyone knows that sword formation has earth-shattering supernatural powers, so if we're at Qing Yun meeting, at least we will have an additional layer of safety. I think the world's good faction cultivators, most likely in a few days, will go to Qing Yun to fight against this unprecedented calamity together. If we are at Qing Yun, naturally we will be at the safest place. There are so many cultivators, they won't just leave us commoners to die. After speaking, the more he thought, the more complacent he was, couldn't help but laughed out. A cold snort was suddenly heard in his laughter. Zhou Yixian was surprised, together with Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist looked over. Ghostly slowly stood up from the shadows, but did not turn, coldly said, I'm afraid those good faction masters will not only leave you to die, they will also give you a kick in the back. Being mocked in his face, Zhou Yixian felt embarrassed, angrily said, Pay, anyway, you are a crooked devil. Even if you go, you will be chased out. Xiao Huan suddenly shouted, Grandpa! Zhou Yixian glanced at Xiao Huan, knew his words were too harsh, angrily shut his mouth. Xiao Huan turned and looked at Ghostly, hesitated but eventually still said, You don't listen to my grandpa. He is just this kind of blabbermouth. Zhou Yixian was enraged, interrupted, You dare to say your own grandpa blabbermouth? Xiao Huan ignored him, still spoke to Ghostly, but the situation now is really not good. You better come with us. After all, that place will be safer than other places. Not waiting for Xiao Huan to finish, Ghostly indifferently said, No need. The world is so big. I have my own place to go. After speaking, his body moved, walked forward. Xiao Huan was shocked. Anxiety appeared on her face, anxiously said, Zhang, where are you going? Ghostly did not reply. His figure gradually sped up. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on his shoulder, turned its head, looked at Xiao Huan, who was staring blankly from the small hilltop, grinned, raised its hand, and waved. Xiao Huan looked at that swiftly disappearing figure. For some reason, suddenly felt an emptiness in her heart. Her nose turned sour. Tears almost flowed down. See, Chapter 279. A light piercing sound. Ghost Li's figure streaked across the night sky. The dark clouds in the sky were heavy. Not a single star could be seen, as if even the sky was affected by the catastrophe in the south, appeared dark and gloomy, not giving one any hope. After leaving Zhou Yixian and the rest, Ghostly flew towards the south for a period of time, just that in this night sky, under the dark clouds, all directions were gloomy and dark, the wilderness and mountains under the sky, desolate and desolate. The people in the air were also empty, not knowing where to go. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on his shoulder, suddenly called out twice. Ghostly glanced at it, saw 3 eyes in front of him. Xiao Hui was grinning to it. Most of the time, it seemed to be happy. Ghost Li's face revealed a rare smile and affection. Gently patted the monkey's head, his body sank down and landed on the ground. The place where they landed was a high mountain in the wilderness with a dense forest. Looking at the lush vegetation and dense shrubs, it was hard to find a place to step on in the forest. It seemed that no one had ever come to this mountain and forest in the wilderness. Ghost Li's face was indifferent. Landed in the forest. Before he landed, his right hand shook. The soul-devouring stick flew out from his sleeve, circled one round under his feet. No strange sound was heard. In a blink, within a radius of 6 chi, all the trees, shrubs, brambles suddenly withered. In a blink turned into withered branches. And following the soul-devouring stick flying back to his hand, Ghostly clearly felt a thin, cold air moving around the black stick. Xiao Hui happily called out, jumped down from his shoulder, and ran deep into the forest. Ghostly looked up at Xiao Hui's back figure. Ever since he went to the southern border, especially after Xiao Hui transformed, its appetite started to increase rapidly, always thinking of eating. The night was deep. The night breeze blew from the wilderness. Brushing past this stretch of forest, the forest made wave-like sounds. Numerous shadows swayed together. Ghostly slowly sat down, slowly closed his eyes. The surrounding tree shadows brushed past his face. In the darkness, he was like a silent spirit. After an unknown period of time, a low roar was heard indistinctly from afar, and then disappeared without a trace. Ghostly frowned slightly, opened his eyes, but his body did not move. As expected after a moment, the nearby bushes shook. It was the monkey Xiao Hui running back. The sharp and annoying brambles to Xiao Hui did not seem to be a threat. Many times it just stepped over them. Running nearer, Ghostly saw it clearly. One of Xiao Hui's hand was on its chest, hugging a few wild fruits, but the other hand was dragging behind it like it was pulling something. Ghostly could not help but felt puzzled, glanced behind it, and was shocked. In the shadows, Xiao Hui was actually dragging something that looked like an animal as it ran back. That animal was not small, much bigger than Xiao Hui, but Xiao Hui was able to drag it very easily. After a while, Xiao Hui had already ran nearer, laughed and put down the wild fruits first, then waved its hand. A muffled sound. A large thing fell in front. That was a mature wild boar. Its head was extremely huge, most likely even taller than Xiao Hui, but right now there was a hole in the wild boar's head. Its body was bleeding. It was already dead. Ghostly looked at the wound, saw that it was still fresh, was stunned for a moment, and said to Xiao Hui, "You caught it?" Xiao Hui grinned, at the same time pointed at the wild boar and then at Ghostly. Ghostly sighed, smiled, and said, "I am not hungry." Xiao Hui scratched its head. Its 3 eyes blinked, and then pointed at the wild boar and then at itself. Ghostly was amused by it and could not help but laugh. For a moment the heaviness in his heart lightened, smiled, and said, "All right, I will help you." Xiao Hui immediately beamed with joy. Obviously, it knew Ghost Li's skills were extraordinary, and it was its favorite. Ghostly rolled up his sleeves, his fingers like a knife, lightly slashed across the wild boar's belly. Immediately, the tough boar skin was cut open. His movements were familiar. In 2 or 3 moves, he skinned the wild boar, and then flew up to find a place with spring water to wash the boar, set up a fire, and started to roast the boar. The fire gradually grew brighter. Xiao Hui and Ghost Li's faces were illuminated by the fire. Xiao Hui had already finished the wild fruits. Right now its eyes were staring at the roasted boar, which was emitting a fragrance. Ghostly slowly took out all kinds of self-made spices from his waist and added some to the meat, then found a small bottle of sesame oil and started to drip it lightly on the boar. The sesame oil slowly flowed along the boar as it was roasted by the fire. It slowly seeped into the meat. Very quickly, the surface of the boar started to turn a faint golden color. Transparent oil droplets oozed out from the boar. An alluring fragrance wafted out. The fire flickered, illuminating the monkeys' and humans' faces, also illuminating the surrounding small open space and trees. The reflections of the tall trees swayed, as if there was a wind whistling. Ghostly looked at the burning fire in front of him, gradually lost in thought, while Xiao Hui looked at the roasted boar with a drooling expression, rubbing its ears and scratching its cheeks, at times running to the side to pluck some branches to add into the fire. In the quiet air, a strange and alluring fragrance pervaded. Deep in the forest, a low roar was suddenly heard. Ho! That roar was deep and powerful, seemed to be very far away, but it was still clearly transmitted over. A murderous intent swiftly spread out. Ghostly abruptly awoke from his deep thoughts. His brows slowly frowned. His body did not move, but his gaze gradually deepened, looking towards the direction of the roar. Xiao Hui with a swoosh jumped on a Ghost Li's shoulder. Its face also did not show any fear, also turned and looked. In the fire, a sound was heard. A branch exploded. The wild boar's fragrance became stronger. 3 feet away, it was the dark forest. The wind in the forest seemed to have suddenly picked up, making whistling sounds. After that low roar, there was no more sound, but that cold and austere killing intent seemed to have a tangible quality as it rapidly approached this place. Ghostly's pupils contracted slightly. His brows frowned even tighter. Crackle! The other twig finally burst apart as well. Suddenly, the whistling wind lost its sound. The entire forest seemed to have stopped. There was no more sound. In the darkness ahead, the dense forest and the intertwining brambles suddenly fell to the sides, revealing a narrow path that could only fit one person. A youth dressed in brightly colored silk clothes, his face handsome to the point of almost having a flirtatious feeling, walked out step by step from the darkness. In the darkness, he was actually so conspicuous, as if the surroundings were lit up because of him. Ghostly did not get up, did not move, still on the ground, his eyes looking straight at this youth. That youth looked at Ghostly and then at Xiao Hui, slightly stunned, with a sound said, "Three-eyed spiritual monkey." Ghostly did not speak, but Xiao Hui suddenly, Gigi, started to cry out, looking very angry. Almost at the same time, when Xiao Hui called out, that deep roar sounded again. The only difference was, this time the roar came directly from the youth's back. Roar. Following this deep and powerful roar, an extremely malevolent monster head slowly rose from the back of the calm-looking youth's shoulder. It had 4 eyes, and 2 pairs of eyes were on either side of its face. They were as thick as copper bells. The mouth was extremely huge, almost as wide as the face. When it opened its mouth, sharp teeth could be seen, especially the 6 sharp fangs protruding from the mouth. It was even more terrifying under the dim light of the flames. Drops of saliva could indistinctly be seen dripping from between the teeth, landing on a monster's grayish-black skin full of lumps. Ghostly's countenance finally changed. He slowly stood up, coldly said, "Tao Tai?" That youth had not replied, his eyes still assessing Ghostly. Suddenly, he seemed to have sensed something and turned to look at the Tao Tai. No one. Couldn't help but was startled. This ferocious beast's ferocious gaze right now had even more greed, but its target was not Ghostly and Xiao Hui, but the wild boar which was being roasted on the ground. The tempting aroma of roasted meat wafted in the air. The youth suddenly laughed, said to Ghostly, "Your cooking is not bad. I was wondering why the Tao Tai was restless tonight. Didn't expect it was attracted by you." Ghostly indifferently said, "Although the Tao Tai is an ancient ferocious beast, ferocious and swift, but has always been gluttonous, a roasted boar is nothing." The youth shook his head, said, "Not so. This Tao Tai of mine is different from the others. Ordinary delicacies have long disregarded it. Didn't expect it to be gluttonous to this extent by your crudely roasted meat." Right now, it was as that youth had said. The Tao Tai seemed to be especially fond of this roasted boar. Saliva flowed down from its mouth and along the gaps of its teeth. Suddenly a whistle. The Tao Tai jumped out from the youth's shoulder, turned into a black shadow, and pounced towards the fire. Unexpectedly, a gray shadow flashed. Angry sounds were heard. It was Xiao Hui who leapt across the sky, blocking in front of the roasted boar. The Tao Tai, with a low roar, landed on the ground and revealed its real body. It had 4 sharp claws. Its body looked to be at least 4 times bigger than that wild boar. The strangest thing was its neck was extremely long, rising upwards, almost doubling the height of its body. Compared to it, Xiao Hui was pitifully small, but for some reason, the Tao Tai seemed to be fearful of Xiao Hui and did not dare to be careless. Just that it could not bear to part with the delicacy in front of it. It growled softly. Its expression also gradually turned ferocious. Ghostly looked at the 2 beasts who were angrily confronting each other over the roasted boar, suddenly said, "This wild boar is not finished roasting. The taste is also not at the right temperature. What are you 2 fighting for?" His words were baffling. Even that youth could not help but take another look at him, but the 2 beasts reacted. The Tao Tai's 4 eyes stared at Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui also stared with 3 eyes. The 2 beasts' 7 eyes stared, one bigger than the other. After a moment, Xiao Hui called out a few times at the Tao Tai, bared its teeth, and then ran a few steps back, sat down beside Ghostly, its eyes staring straight at the roasted boar. The Tao Tai's 4 eyes followed Xiao Hui's movements. After Xiao Hui sat down, This ferocious beast called out twice, inconceivably also slowly walked to the other side of the fire, retracted its hind legs, swung its forelegs lightly, actually also crouched down in front of the fire. Saliva still flowed out uncontrollably from its mouth. Other than looking horrifying, it also looked somewhat funny. That youth watched the Tao-Tai sit down, slowly walked over, did not seem to care about the filth on the ground, sat down beside the Tao-Tai, looked at Ghostly, smiled and said, "Who is your distinguished self? I did not expect you to have such means." Even the Tao-Tai can temporarily suppress its ferocious nature. Ghostly did not look at him, sat down, his eyes drifted back to the fire, said, "You, when I met by chance deep in the mountains, why do we need to know each other's names? It is only a roasted boar, only to fill one's stomach." The youth looked at Ghostly for a while, suddenly laughed loudly, his laughter loud and clear, startling countless night birds in the distance. "Well said, well said." He lightly tapped his leg, a look of praise on his face, said, "What a good only to fill one's stomach. Speaking of which, all the living beings in the world busy themselves all day, isn't it just to fill one's stomach? In that case, the so-called human that you said, isn't it also the same as me, this Tao-Tai evil beast? There is no difference?" Ghostly gently flipped the roasted boar. The fragrance of sesame oil on the boar immediately thickened, tempting the Tao-Tai opposite to him for a while, but not knowing if it was to savor the delicacy or for something else. This strange beast, other than being ferocious, and also known for its gluttony, actually endured it, and at the same time, Xiao Hui fiercely glared at it. The fire quietly burned. Reflecting on Ghostly's face, he slowly said, "There are differences between humans." The youth said, "What?" Ghostly said, "Love and hate, affection and enmity. Humans have feelings." The youth laughed loudly, said, "Don't know the beasts also have feelings? You killed this wild boar. You should know the wild boar's pain and fear, just like when I kill you. You will also be like a boar. All living beings are equal. Where is the difference between humans and beasts?" Ghostly looked up, looked at the youth, said, "There is a difference." The youth's gaze turned sharp, said, "What difference?" Ghostly said, "I have a great regret in my life, day and night engraved in my heart. Living is worse than death, but I cannot not live. Living I still have hope, dying I will be a heartless and cowardly person. This kind of affection and enmity, how could a pig have it?" The youth was startled, the sharpness in his eyes gradually faded, and then a strange expression appeared on his face. Note 1. Tao-Tai, Strange Gods and Demons. Strange Beasts Chapter. In the extreme south of the Divine Prefecture, there's an evil beast for eyes, black skin, long neck and 4 legs. Its nature ferocious, extremely gluttonous. It advances as swift as the wind, wreaking havoc. Chapter 280. Silence all around. Only the occasional crackling of branches could be heard from the fire. That strange young man and Ghostly did not speak again. The fire expanded and contracted, burning between them. The color and luster of the roasted pig gradually turned golden. In the midst of the rich aroma, at the same time a faint burnt smell emerged. The entire surface of the roasted pig was covered by a transparent layer of faint oil droplets. Ghostly finally turned the roasted pig a few times, said, "It's done. All of you can eat." He had just finished speaking. Xiao Hui and the Tao-Tai pounced forward at the same time. Xiao Hui Zizi called out, stretched out his hand, and grabbed one of the hind legs of the roasted pig. The pig's skin, which was roasted hot, did not seem to feel anything in its hand. Just as the Tao-Tai was even more powerful, it did not move its limbs or claws, directly opened its bloody mouth, disregarding the fact that the pork was still above the fire, directly stuck its head in and bit down. The Tao-Tai's mouth, which was already huge, became even more frightening. Such a huge roasted pig was actually bitten by this strange beast, leaving only one hind leg which was held outside by Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui was enraged. Its monkey face revealed an angry expression. Its hand grabbed the pig leg and refused to let go, at the same time jumping and shouting. The Tao-Tai evil beast did not care so much. Its mouth full of sharp teeth bit down. Immediately, like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, it bit the delicious pork into two. Xiao Hui was caught off guard. For a moment it used too much strength and fell backwards, rolled twice on the ground. When it stood up, its hand was only holding onto a pig leg. As for the majority of that delicious roasted pig, right now it was in the Taotai's mouth, chewing loudly. The remaining pig bones were also directly crushed and swallowed into its stomach, like a tornado sweeping away the clouds, sweeping away an army of 1,000. Especially the 4 eyes on its face, squeezed to the sides of its face by the bulging big mouth. The 4 eyes were still shining brightly. Obviously, it was eating to its heart's content. Zizi, Xiao Hui saw that half of its delicacy was snatched away by this ferocious beast. How could it not be angry, but after calling out a few times, abruptly lowered its head and also started to chew. It ate extremely fast. In a short while, it had already finished half of the pig leg. Oh, the Taotai's deep roar sounded again. It slowly turned its head to look at Xiao Hui. Such a huge roasted pig. In just a short while, it had already eaten it cleanly, swallowed it whole. Not even the bones were left. And very obviously, the Taotai was not satisfied. Its 4 eyes were glowing, staring straight at the last piece of meat bone in Xiao Hui's hand. Xiao Hui ferociously ate the last piece of meat. Its 3 eyes widened at the same time, staring at the Taotai. Taotai's mouth was full of saliva, drooling with desire. Step by step walked toward Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui fiercely waved his hand. The remaining bone in his hand was thrown far away in another direction. At the same time, his face revealed a gloating expression. Unexpectedly, Taotai's figure flashed, like lightning. In a blink of an eye, it soared up, caught up to the flying meat bone, bit it, made a turn in the air, and flew back, landing beside that young man. Just that right now, Taotai also seemed to know that this was the last thing, did not swallow it in one mouthful. Instead, it looked like it cherished it very much, stuck out its tongue, and kept on licking the meat bone. Xiao Hui was startled by Taotai's actions. After a while, it turned to Ghostly, suddenly waved its hands and feet, calling out. Ghostly looked at it for a while. Suddenly his expression changed, said, "You said it looks like the Huang?" Xiao Hui immediately nodded and then looked at Taotai. The anger on its face gradually faded, replacing it was a kind of unfamiliar but warm expression. It watched Taotai for a while and then carefully moved over, slowly stretched out its hand, looking like it wanted to touch Taotai's hideous head. Taotai's ferocious head turned, warily growled in a low voice. Xiao Hui immediately jumped back, but then called out twice quietly, again approached Taotai, and Taotai's attention also seemed to temporarily leave the meat bone on Xiao Hui. After a while, Xiao Hui's hand again stretched over. Taotai did not move, but its 4 eyes were watching Xiao Hui's hand, while Ghostly and that young man remained silent. Especially that young man's eyes had a strange glint, quietly watching the interaction between these 2 strange beasts. Xiao Hui's hand touched Taotai's head, gently stroked it. Taotai quietly growled twice, but did not have any intention to object. Its attention once again returned to that meat bone in front of it. Xiao Hui then slowly approached the strange beast, using its hand to gently stroke Taotai's body. Its monkey face revealed a happy expression. Ghostly slowly lowered his head, vaguely remembered many years ago at Big Bamboo Valley. Xiao Hui and a Huang seemed to have become close like this. Time flowed like water, so Xiao Hui still remembered that time. That young man suddenly broke the silence, said with a smile, "Didn't expect both of them to be so fated, isn't it?" Ghostly glanced at Xiao Hui and Taotai. A trace of warmth in his eyes, said, "That's right." The young man turned his head, added a small branch to the fire, and then became silent again. After a long time, he suddenly laughed and said, "This Taotai has followed me for who knows how many years. I always thought it was me who was taking care of it. Didn't expect to discover today that it is actually much happier than me." The smile on his face seemed to have an indistinct bitterness, said, "Other than eating and drinking to its heart's content, even if it is not of the same kind, there is still you, this monkey, who is willing to be its friend." Ghostly looked up at this young man, saw his desolate expression, as if there was an indescribable loneliness, indifferently said, "If you're lonely, just go find a friend." That young man snorted, proudly said, "In this world, who is worthy to be my friend, and who dares to be my friend?" Ghostly frowned. This young man's tone was really exaggerated. He felt a little disgusted, but the young man seemed to recall something. His face dimmed, quietly muttered to himself, but there is actually one person. I sincerely believe her." Ghostly looked at him through the burning fire, indifferently said, "How?" That young man's face suddenly turned cold, sneered and said, "Later on, I then discovered that she was lying to me. Not only that, she also made me so miserable, almost consigned to eternal damnation." Ghostly was silent. From that young man's expression, he unexpectedly recalled that buried deep in his heart 10 years ago. That benevolent monk's face seemed to appear before his eyes again. He suddenly shook his head fiercely, but exerted strength in his hand. The branch that was being added to the fire made a slight hoarse sound, turned into powder, scattered all over the ground. The young man glanced at his hand, suddenly said, "You also have such a sad past?" Ghostly's face was gloomy, did not speak. That young man looked at him, a glint in his eyes, suddenly said, "If you're going to die now, do you still have any unfulfilled wishes?" Ghostly was surprised, a wave of confusion in his heart. In that instant, thousands of thoughts came flooding in. This question that he had never thought of, suddenly placed in front of him. Deep enmity, great hatred, 10 years of long-cherished wish, lingering white clothes. In this life of wind and rain, he had never thought that deep in his heart. What last wish did he have? It should be to save Bai Yao. If he could save her, even if he died, he would be willing. This thought, in the countless nights of these 10 years, he did not know how many times he had thought about it. Just that there was still that frosty face. In the end, he could not give it up. In the secluded corner of his heart, gently drifting for a moment, he was dazed. The night wind whistled, not knowing how much time had passed. When he woke up with a start, that young man had already disappeared. The Tao-Tai on the ground seemed to have just soared up into the sky, merging into one with the darkness of the night. Its deep, deep roars were heard from afar. Xiao Hui scurried up his shoulder, called out twice. Ghostly slowly looked up at the sky, suddenly quietly said, "Xiao Hui, I still have to see her one more time, right?" Xiao Hui did not seem to understand and was too lazy to bother. Its monkey head also looked up at the sky, seemed to be still searching for the Tao-Tai. The embers of the gradually extinguished bonfire gradually turned into a wisp of smoke, gently drifted away. Ghostly and Xiao Hui stood quietly in this deep forest for a long, long time in the night wind. Only faint low sounds could be heard. Still have to see her one more time. This world catastrophe. With the passing of time, the situation became more tragic. The strange beast had already killed their way into the Central Plains. The common people suffered heavy casualties. The good faction disciples who were sent out to investigate had mostly disappeared. A few of them with slightly higher skills came back. All of them were wounded, and when they reported to the various good faction teachers, they spoke of the horrors of the strange beasts. The people in the world were plunged into misery and suffering. The good faction were helpless. At this time, the news of Qingyun sect, Tianyin Temple, Funxiang Valley, 3 big good faction sects meeting at Qingyun Hill and inviting the world's good faction to join hands to deal with this calamity. Immediately, the world's cultivators started to gather at Qingyun Hill. In just a few days, the vicinity of Qingyun Hill had an unprecedented number of people, and most of them were Central Plains common people who had fled here. In their eyes, these immortal-like cultivators at Qingyun Hill were already their last hope. Qingyun sect, who was in charge of reception, was extremely busy. More and more fellow cultivators and common people came to Qingyun. Very soon, Qingyun sect Tongtian Peaks guest rooms were not enough. They had to ask the other branches to also open their guest rooms. Fortunately, Qingyun sect was after all 1,000 years big sect, with deep roots and great assets. In the end, they still accommodated. But the small Bamboo Valley branch of the 7 branches, because it had always been female disciples, and because Shuewa Master's temperament was strange, it was not open to the public. Many of the young disciples who had admired it for a long time felt it was a pity. But no matter what, although the calamity was before them, but this was still an unprecedented good faction big gathering. Qingyun sect as the host, their reputation was even more than before. Indistinctly, the world already had the intention to follow Qingyun sect's lead, and Qingyun sect head Reverend Daoxian, right now, even more firmly sat on the world's #1 person position. At night, Qingyun Hill range up and down the peaks were brightly lit. It was really a grand occasion that had not been seen for thousands of years. Far below the mountain, following the mountain breeze, One could almost hear the people's loud chatter and laughter. The people who were afraid because of the calamity, under such circumstances, seemed to feel much more relaxed. After all, even if the sky collapsed, wasn't there still Qingyun Hill above their heads? And right now, the quietest place on Qingyun Hill was probably Small Bamboo Valley. After Qingyun sect's kind explanation, all the sects strictly restricted their disciples, strictly prohibited them from going near Small Bamboo Valley. After all, in the current situation, if there was still a farce of lecherous prodigal son, most likely no one would look good. Compared to the hustle and bustle of the other peaks, Small Bamboo Valley appeared much quieter. Occasionally 2 or 3 beautiful Small Bamboo Valley female disciples would pass by. The mountain breeze blew gently. The tears bamboos all over the mountain swayed together, making rustling sounds. This night the moonlight was clear and cold, shone on the Small Bamboo Valley mountain path. The bamboo shadows danced, the shadows wavering on the mountain steps. From afar, 4 or 5 Small Bamboo Valley female disciples walked over. The one in front was Wenmin. These female disciples, including Wenmin, all looked gloomy, their brows frowning, seemed to be troubled. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.